Hey there, Smite fans, Aggro here. Look, every single year, the SPL just keeps getting better. Season 7 was incredible, and in Season 8, I'm sure our players are going to take their game to the next level. But in order to do that, they're going to need the best gear they can get their hands on. And that's why I'm so excited to announce the title sponsor for Season 8 of the SPL is Alienware. Yeah, that Alienware. Our players are getting the best of the best in computer gaming. These Alienware Aurora Ryzen Edition PC setups are insane. Not only will these be the PCs that the players will compete on once we are in studio, but Alienware is also providing one for each player at their home setup to make sure their practice is as good as possible. Now let's get down to brass tacks. The specs on these Alienware Aurora Ryzen Edition desktops are amazing. An AMD Ryzen 9 16-core processor.
That's a lot of cores.
That's plenty of processing power.
That's a lot of cores.
Plenty of cores.
If you want to stream, this is the way to go.
I know a lot about my cores, so. I mean, Pilates, right?
64 gigabytes of DDR4 RAM.
What? Is that true?
That is true.
I mean, this thing has 64 gigs of DDR4 RAM.
Which you can do literally anything with.
Literally anything.
I've never had more than 16 gigs.
That's quadruple the amount I have at home.
And one of the hottest commodities in the PC world, an NVIDIA GeForce 3090 graphics card.
Insane how much better this is than what I have.
The best graphics you really need, Ultra, of course.
Content's gonna look good.
And what's the point of all the power if you can't see it? Players will also be using the Alienware 25-inch 240 Hz monitors.
Man, when I load into scrims with this bad boy, I'm gonna feed so hard. And it's gonna be in perfect picture quality.
We are so excited to be partnering with Alienware for Season 8 of the SMITE Pro League. And the best part is, this VIP treatment, it's not just for the pros. You too can get the best possible SMITE experience. Just go to smitegame.com/Alienware and use code SMITEAW to get special discounts on some of Alienware's best products. Thanks again to Alienware. Make sure you're following them on Twitter and Instagram. That's at Alienware on both platforms. And you can join their community at alienwarearena.com.
And you're telling me an alien wore this?
Hello, everybody, and welcome in to Day 2 of Phase 2 of Season 8 of the SMITE Pro League. Aggro and Mifflin going to be riding the desk all day long to bring you what should be some great SMITE action as we get prepared to really see what these teams are going to bring here in Day number 2 of Week number 1. I think I said that wrong the first time, but I got to say this one right. Make sure we thank Alienware, our title sponsor here for Season 8 of the SMITE Pro League. Thanks so much for Alienware to coming on board as our exclusive title sponsor. Our pros are playing on the powerful Aurora R10 Ryzen desktop and Alienware 25-inch 240 Hz gaming monitor. Make sure you're checking out the rest of their awesome products at smitegame.com/Alienware, clicking on your region, and then using code SMITEAW in order to get some exclusive special discounts. So again, thank you to Alienware for being our title sponsor here for Season 8 of the SMITE Pro League. Mifflin, today we're kicking it off with Valkyries and the Oni Warriors, and anytime these two teams are playing, you know that there's going to be a little bit of that extra, a lot of guys from Europe who are pretty familiar with one another, and both these teams really needing some wins to generate some momentum here in this phase.
Yeah, Valkyries taking a little bit of a rough stumble yesterday, but I think Hinduman said it best. That was some of the best play we've seen from the Valkyries, full stop. It's a distinctive European-style Rapper, bringing back some of that SSG meta, going for that late-game 30-ish minute team compositions. And I really do like that identity for them, but they weren't quite able to make it to that point. So if they want to today to keep running with that strategy, it's all about how well they can withstand the Oni Warriors early game.
We'll see if that's going to happen for the Valkyries a little bit later on. And of course, the Solar Scarabs and the Tartarus Titans will be our second set of the day. But first, we got to break down this Warriors Valkyrie set, as mentioned. Overall, I feel like when we're thinking about what these Valkyries players are doing, they've done a lot better as coming into the Phase 1 playoffs, even though they didn't make it. And then the beginning of Phase 2, as you mentioned, looking a little bit better. But what are some of the things that you think they still need to make those areas of improvements on?
They just need to clean up the rotations around the early game. So often in that last set, we saw them, all right, they're coming to our red buff. There's going to be 4 people there. Let's start to rotate in. And they rotate in as just units of 2. 2 people maybe clash with 4 people in the jungle. That's not going to work. You're getting outnumbered every single time. So if it is going to be this defensive style for the first 30 or so minutes of the game, it's all about controlling your own buffs. You don't need to worry so much about the neutral camps if you know your composition is going to be better come late. It's just keeping that acceptable parameters of loss. If you come into the 25-minute mark, 3,000 gold down, it's not even elite.
Well, one of the people that's going to have to hold on to their buff in particular is going to be Ducky, because Ducky is in a position where he's going up against really the one player from the Warriors that has been really consistent so far this year in Nika. And Ducky is kind of gotten the treatment at times, I feel like, Miff. He's certainly been the focus of a lot of teams.
He really has been. Mans is lucky if he gets his second rotation of blue buffs. In general, it doesn't matter what the team composition is or who they're playing against. It just feels like a lot of the teams in the league have really identified Ducky as the guy we're trying to shut down. We're trying to make sure he doesn't have a great early game. But when Ducky does do well, when he has that support net around him, he rotates out of lane incredibly well. His dive has been immaculate so far this year. So I think if the Valhalla Valkyries can just facilitate him a little bit, he might be able to pop off here today.
I mean, the number 1 pick so far for the Valkyries coming into this set has been Wukong. They've top 3'd that more than any other god, and that's a type of god that can withstand the island. And I don't think it's really Ducky's play style that forces teams to come over and camp him. It's really that Johnny wants to be playing these late game scaling gods, as you were alluding to. And a lot of times teams aren't looking to punish him for it, they're looking to punish Ducky.
Yeah, he just doesn't have that jungle presence in the early game. But if Johnny does make it to that late game phase, man, I know he's so capable of carrying these games. We saw it at the SEC. We've seen flashes of it here in the SPL. I'm excited for this one.
Well, let's get a chance to talk to Ducky right now. He's joining us for a pregame interview here for the Valkyries. Ducky, thanks so much for taking the time before your set.
Oh.
Hey, take a drink. Are you good? We can wait for you, man. I don't want to interrupt your pregame ritual here.
So I was just listening to you guys boost my ego, and I was taking a drink. I wasn't ready.
Hey, we're all good here, man. Hey, you've been playing really well, I think, despite the struggles of the overall team. How difficult has it been to keep the mentality up? Do you need us to keep boosting your ego on the desk is basically what I'm asking.
I mean, I'm not going to say no, you know, you can do what you want. But I know it's been tough, especially with the ping, as always. I hate that we have to keep bringing that up, but
yeah,
it kind of sucks, especially Johnny yesterday DCing when he's going for that kill. That one was a rough one, but hopefully we pick it up today.
Hopefully you pick it up today, and for you in particular, you've got a pretty tough matchup in your lane. Nika has really been the rock of consistency for a Warriors team that's kind of lost out to sea right now. What have you seen from him that's made him look so good?
What has made Nika look good? I don't know, man. Has he really done anything? I'm not sure. No, I can't be doing that. His Tsukiyomi's really good. I think that's one to look out for. I think he has a strong Arthur as well, so hopefully I don't play into any of those today.
Hey, at least today, you know, the ping matchup, you got a couple Warriors players on ping on the other side. Maybe today's your day, Ducky. What do you say?
Yeah, maybe we abuse the ping. Just go for those players. See what happens. But, yeah.
Filthy ping abusers, man. Can't believe you guys are resorting to it, too. Hey, good luck today, Duck.
All right, thank you. Take care.
Always a pleasure to get to talk to the solo laner for the Valkyries, Ducky, a consummate professional. But like you said, it's got to be a little frustrating at times with the way this team has gone. They are actually on a losing streak that could match Obey's losing streak from last year if they were to lose today's set, I believe. So that's not exactly where you wanted to be coming into this. But I think that this team has a lot of upside and has a lot of things to look forward to as the phase continues. Definitely a little bit different, I would say, in that regard.
Ducky's out here breaking Ducky records, or maybe not doing it to here today. But look, I think that they've come up with strategies that can certainly work for this team. In Phase 1, we're saying on the desk, it feels like these Valkyrie squad is really struggling to find their identity.
Yeah.
And I think last set we saw from them was the first glimpse of them really trying to solidify how it is they're trying to transition themselves into Worlds. If they can keep that up, I think they're going to be a team to look out for.
Well, on the other side, the Oni Warriors, as we've mentioned, they've had their own struggles so far this phase and really this year in its entirety, but they were able to turn up at Phase 1 playoffs, at least for a little bit. as I've been saying this whole death segment, the one guy who's been the consistent mark for them, though, has been Nika.
And Nika has been a great consistent mark. He's not averaging 6s across the board, right? He is running it at a 10, full throttle for his team. And Ducky brings up two of the picks that I had highlighted as well. The Tsukiyomi and the King Arthur for this guy feels almost unbeatable in lane. Sure, they're not always able to transition it into a Titan kill, but you better believe the short lane has been dominated by Nika consistently. I am worried, though. In the past, the Oni Warriors have been a squad that have played to the level of their opposition. Sometimes they're playing up to the tiers of the Jade Dragons. They're matching the Leviathans and the Kings. And then other times they struggle a little bit against teams that you would really expect them to be able to dominate. Maybe if you're an Oni Warriors fan, you're hoping they're not trying to play that style anymore up against the Valkyries.
Yeah, trying to play at their own pace and not just matching that of their opposition. I think the big difference, of course, whenever it was time to step up at the playoffs, I think Neil played a lot better. I think he had a bit of a rough day yesterday, at least the very beginning of Game 2. Dardez is going to need to continue to improve. I do think he's done that. And Fred being a consistent contributor out of the jungle, that mid 3v3, I think, has been where a lot of the struggles lie for the Warriors.
An uncharacteristically quiet year here for Fred. Usually in the regular season, he has been a linchpin for every single team he's been on. Back in the past, he was hailed as adapting light, and then maybe eventually he got that Kingslayer title to himself as well. So we can expect great things from Fred, but he has not been able to bring that to the forefront too consistently so far this year.
We'll see if he can end up doing that as we get ready for this game number 1. I think that the way the Warriors have picked and banned has been pretty interesting to me because they've really, I'm looking at their list here of their top 3s. It is long. Their bottom 2s, it is long. They really like to switch up what they're doing as the season has gone on, and I think that speaks to trying to nail down that identity that you were talking about for the Valkyries. I think the Valkyries may have found their identity before the Warriors really have.
There is potential for it, but the Warriors have versatility, I think. When they do find things that work for them, they find multiple things. Sure, we can play that early game style. Maybe we want to wait it out for that little bit of a later game style as well. We've seen them utilize sustain at certain points here in Season 8. A little bit worse on the sustain as it's seen a global nerf, but I think that the Warriors certainly have strategies that can work. It's just whether or not they want to employ them on the day of.
Yeah, fair enough. It's Yamoja, the first ban for the Valkyries, and when Neil has looked good, a lot of times it has been on that Yamoja, so that ban certainly makes sense to me. And the Valkyries really trying to focus out that duo lane, which has struggled in the early stages a decent amount. I think that these two duo lanes have both had their fair share of struggles and their fair share of shining moments. It's interesting to me that the Valkyries seem pretty focused on trying to not nail down that duo lane as their advantage point.
No, I like what the Valkyries have done so far here in the band. They're trying to really limit that early game aggression from the Oni Warriors, and when we've spoken with the Olympus Bolts or even the Solar Scarabs in the past, Zatman and Barracuda both have said, Season 8, it's a duo lane meta. Whoever controls the long lane controls the early pace of the match. Gold Furies are pretty easy to burn through. The Scorpion goes down pretty easily as well. So it makes sense to me that the Valkyries, if they are trying to go for this later game strategy, are trying to limit that early game aggression from the Oni Warriors. You can see it reflected in their bans perfectly. They're not just taking away targeted god picks, but Yamoja, Chiron, Ymir, all 3 gods that dominate the first 10 minutes of the game.
And specifically on that duo side of the map, whereas the Oni Warriors looking much more at the mid in jungle of Giannis, Loki, and Gilgamesh, taking away some of those power picks. And sure enough, the Valkyries go straight to one of Ducky's comfort picks. They top pick the Wukong, which I don't hate, but I also don't know if I love it. It's a very wait-and-see sort of selection.
It is. It's, all right, well, nothing really has a great matchup in a Sun Wukong, but Sun Wukong doesn't have really that many great matchups in of himself. I would have preferred maybe a King Arthur coming through. Ducky had alluded to the fact that he was a little bit hesitant to play against Nika's King Arthur. Well, that would have been an opportunity to make sure that that doesn't come to fruition. But with Tsukiyomi on the table as well, maybe it's a catch-20. You're going to get the Nika special one way or the other.
And Tiamat was open. That's the pick that I was thinking of whenever they locked in this Wukong. They give up the Tiamat. They let Dardez have it. If memory serves, Dardez has not looked particularly fearsome on this pick quite yet, but I don't know. That's not a risk I'm willing to take forever, right? I mean, Dardez is eventually going to start popping on gods like Tiamat. Tiamat Sobek feels like a very good top 2 here.
And it makes perfect sense. Nika has no stress on taking his pick, so even if he is worried about the King Arthur and the Tsukiyomi getting banned out in the second phase, once it rolls around to third pick, he can pick it up for himself. So instead, we see the Oni Warriors put a little bit more emphasis on Neil Ma's pick, and well, when Neilma's playing Sobek, it's looking pretty good for these boys.
Definitely one of the top selections there for the Warriors as this year has gone on. Neath Soul solidifies that backline here for the Valkyries. Neath has been a pick that has been consistently banned away from the Valkyries. Zeros has looked very, very comfortable on it, and it's oftentimes paired with something like that Ao Kuang in the jungle, but they don't go for it right here. Instead, they get a pick that Emilito has looked very good on in the Soul. These might be the two picks that Zeros and ML respectively have looked their best on so far this year.
Yeah, just consistent first bloods when Zero's been able to play this Soul pick, but now the Valkyries have really shown their hand. They're going for a consistent single target damage composition, as is the way of this pseudo double hunter, magical hunter, and standard hunter for their draft so far. I would be overly surprised if we see exactly what comes through here. Oni Warriors spot that one out from a mile away, say you're not getting the Fafnir. Coerce would just work too well with this draft. Remove it from the table.
Yep, love the Fafnir ban. I think Fafnir and Ao Kuang are the bans that I would expect to see here from the Warriors, just based on what the Valkyries have done with these types of compositions. Whereas on the other side, Arthur is the pick that I'm looking at that you might have to take away from Nika, but like Ducky said, you got to worry about his Tsukiyomi, you have to worry about his Kukulkan. You've got a lot of things that Nika can still pull out.
I'm actually flabbergasted that the Ao Kuang ban came through here. I know that Johnny loves that pick, and he's had great success on it in the past, but it's really putting all your eggs in that auto attack basket. Sure, Shell and Nerf recently doesn't have the block stacks anymore. Now it's only about 50% auto attack mitigation once you have that health shield for you. But with the composition that the Valkyries have already, I was expecting maybe an earlier game pick out of the jungle, something that can bridge this Neath and Soul into that late game phase.
Well, let's see if that's the way they decide to go. Athena is still open, certainly has fallen out of favor since her dominance in the middle of phase 1, but this is still a flex pick. You can put this support, you can put it in jungle. I don't think that this feels like a Johnny pick to me. He's usually not that facilitator role. He's trying to play gods like Set that can get in there and do the vast majority of the carrying themselves. But Athena does set up pretty well. I mean, taunt into Neath Spirit Arrow feels like a pretty strong combo.
It does, but the Geb hover, this is concerning for me if this Geb gets locked in, because that's the main weakness we saw in their last set yesterday. It wasn't that ability to transition themselves into the late game, and right now, all of Valkyrie's early game is centered around this Sun Wukong. That's their best pick for the first 15 minutes, and the Valkyries very seldom like to play through their short lane.
And it's Tsukiyomi now for Johnny, who did have a very good showing, at least through the first half of one of the games yesterday. I think that overall, Neath does scale pretty well, but she also brings more pressure than most mid lane mages. I'd expect the Valkyries to have mid pressure over the Tiamat in particular. I agree, though, this Geb pick, it's great against Serket. Typical counter matchup there. Single target CC, single target shield feels pretty good, but Geb just has so much trouble getting off the ground.
Yeah, it's when we talk about gods like Ares or Ymir, it's that double-edged sword. Sure, they can blow out the early game, or they can get absolutely decimated in the early themselves. Geb doesn't really have that potential. If he gets beaten out in the early, he stays beaten down for the next 25, 30 or so minutes until he can get a lot of items under his belt. And with the build that Rapper was running yesterday, no boots getting picked up. I know you can run the memes right now in the chat, but he went into the Wing Blade and then immediately into the Relic Dagger to get that movement speed. He was a sitting duck in the early game. It was pretty easy to shut him down.
Yeah, tank boots are still in the game, and therefore you should buy them. Pretty much every time, because they are that good until they get removed. So I agree. I think that we got to see the tank boots here from Raffer. But overall, I mean, you're looking at the Oni Warriors composition. It's Sobek pluck into damage from Tiamat. They scale fairly well centered around this Tiamat, but overall, I might like the Valkyries draft a little bit more.
I do like the Valkyries draft, but once this gets into the team fight or the 3v3 in the early game, I'm still concerned, man. This Geb is just such a non-factor in the early if he falls behind. But the Oni Warriors draft has one thing going for him in spades once we do get to that late game team fight, and it's that dive potential. It's not just the Sobek, Serket, and King Arthur. Tiamat, when she goes in that four-legged stance, she can dive with the best of them. Chernobog can close gap all on his own. If he's getting dove alone in the back, goes up into the ultimate, rejoins his team into the enemy backline as well. So the Valkyries are going to play these team fights incredibly intelligently. If it does make it to that late game team fight, though, they have phenomenal counter engage to this Geb.
Yeah, Geb really has that great defensive nature, so you're going to be in a pretty good spot there. I mean, I'm looking at the Valkyries' potential to do objectives. That's awfully good between Neath and Soul. You're feeling really good about taking down towers, Gold Furies, Fire Giants. They can kind of do it all. I think that Johnny, as a jungler, when you're looking at what you want to do on Tsukiyomi, it's, I want to Piercing Moonlight onto the backline and kill that dude. But as you said, the Warriors aren't going to be in the backline. They're going to be in your backline. As a jungler, how do you have to adjust against compositions like this?
You really got to either look for the 1v1. Very often we'll see when junglers can't really dive the backline consistently, they'll try and split up the map. So if there's a dance around Fire Giant, they'll move into mid, try and pressure out some waves, force someone to rotate over and deal with you. Take that 1v1, hopefully win it. Not always consistently able to do so, especially against gods like Surcat, who has such a phenomenal 1v1 in her own right. It's all about utilizing that Geb shield. If you can't dive in consistently safely, well, at least you've got Stone's shield to keep you alive a little bit longer.
Yeah, that's really going to have to be on Raffer's shoulders, making sure that this backline stays up and alive, and potentially even Johnny on those dives in, giving him one of those preemptive shields and letting him work his magic. We're working on getting into game, so appreciate your patience as we look now at what Dardez is going to be able to do on this Tiamat. I don't know about you, Miff, but Tiamat's still good. I don't think she's, like, obviously the best mage in the game. She does a lot of things really well, but I don't think she split pushes nearly as well as she used to. You need 3 portals in order to really push a wave effectively now, and that's before a nerf that's coming in to those portals even more. I just think that she's good in the late. She's very good in the late game. I'm not super sold on how good her early game is.
Her early game is a little bit exploitable. It's very easy to dive onto this god. She used to have that damage mitigation so much earlier on with the scales passive, but now you really got to start to build up that power, which has really slowed down her game as well. But you still got to talk about her artillery damage from a range. She's got a little bit of that Thoth syndrome in that I'm going to hit you from further away than you can hit me, and also I'll stun you from further away as well. So she's got a little bit of versatility in the early game, but I think you're right to be hesitant on how much pressure he's really going to be able to generate from mid.
I do like Tiamat in situations like you have a god like Surcat or Sobek that have very predictable CC, that you know where they're going to be, and you can full charge your one, blast them, stun them, you can do whatever you want off of that CC. And thinking of that Surcat, a pick that has been pretty hot or cold. We've seen it in support still a little bit, mostly in jungle. Where are you on Surcat and her strength as a god right now?
I think that Surcat has almost Season 4 Bakasura vibes in that she just clears the jungle faster than just about anyone else. So she should be able to dictate the pace of the early game, choosing where the junglers are forced to engage. If this Surcat is constantly over in the long lane, well, Johnny's going to have to match that pressure. If she decides to camp out that soul lane, Johnny's going to have to match that pressure. If Johnny ever pulls ahead of this Surcat and starts dictating the pace himself, that's going to be very good for the Valkyries. And honestly, with this draft, that's kind of what Johnny has to do. He is that bridge to make sure that this soul has time to flourish.
How close do the Valkyries have to keep it in the early stages in order for their prowess in the late game to really come through? Can they be down 5K at 20 minutes and still be in a winning position?
5,000 gold, 20 minutes in, maybe a little bit too much up against this Oni Warriors draft, because it's not just a clean win as far as draft goes for the Valkyries in the late game. You've already highlighted how strong this Tiamat is in the late game, but Sobek scales incredibly well. King Arthur has phenomenal dive. I would say you probably want to keep it in the realm to 3 to 5K, but maybe move that clock back to 25 minutes.
We'll see if they can keep it in that range, and the Valkyries can be poised to strike as we throw it to Hinduman and Taco for game number 1.
Thanks so much, Aggro and Mifflin on the desk. Into game 1 we go between two teams, Taco, that both feel, let's be honest, in terms of the public opinion so far, it could go either way this set.
This is looking like a very close matchup, Hindus, particularly with these compositions. I think that both teams came out with some pretty even drafts.
I was looking at the actual situation of the Neath versus Sol, and I was wondering if it was going to be the Neath in mid or in the dual lane. I know for a fact that Zeros likes both Neath and Sol here, but I do want to talk about the duo matchup pressure then. Sol versus the Chernobog in the early game. What are we expecting there? Let's not factor in the supports just yet.
It goes both ways, because on the one hand, you've got Emilito with the Soul passive and the Stellar Burst, usually a lot more consistent in terms of clear, but Neilmaw, Sickening Strike, able to tag the whole wave. Raffer could struggle a little bit with that knock-up to match the pressure, but the main thing to look at is vote on this Chernobog. And Chernobog's not one that we traditionally see coming to light, but it makes perfect sense when you're dealing with the likes of a Tsukiyumi from Johnny, because he's the only hunter that doesn't have to necessarily forfeit his Aegis in order to avoid that Tsuki ult.
Yeah, he can use his ultimate himself, or he could, dive in the wall,
Just goes into darkness every single time, and that's like the only immunity play around that I think Vote is trying to work with here, and it just adds further into the Oni Warriors' dive mentality because Chernobog is probably one of the best hunters at working his way into a backline right away.
Well, we saw the Warriors play yesterday and the Valkyries too, obviously. And one thing I did notice, a lot of the community have noticed that Vote gets a lot of focus in this dual lane from a lot of teams as of late. So the Chernobog, it will help him out a little bit more, I would say.
Hopefully, it's just a tough situation with that
on
much
Geb
dive.
in that dual lane. I don't even know how well he's doing now as we cut away just at the same time. But well down to half health there. Onto Vote, onto Rafa, and Emilito steps up. Needs a bit of poke himself, but does have that shield to prevent some of the damage.
Seems as though Neilma is really trying to force this Geb into an awkward position.
Good
Cubo
stuff.
actually going to get caught out on the jump. Could be a first blood opportunity here for Johnny. He's looking to catch Cubo. Doesn't have the escape, and a root is good from Zeros. A first blood strike, and this is the first time the Valkyries are getting this Neath mid. And we're starting to see some of the good reason why teams choose not to let Zeros have this one.
Yeah, I mean, it causes some problems for them. I do say that's an individual play from Johnny there, just timing that nicely. The ambush, once you actually hit that ability on Circuit and you go into the stealth option, that's the moment where that ability is triggered and you can lose the tail end of that on the jump away. Nice little work from Johnny to find the first blood, and I was going to turn to that, Taco, of when I look at the Valkyries composition here, the deaths were kind of saying it. Feels like a counterpunch team, this. Counter-initiate, especially with the Warriors draft. Let the Warriors come onto you here if you're the Valkyries, and then re-initiate after the fact.
Unless you're Johnny and you can just go hunting on your own, because Cuvo might have revealed early on that he didn't actually have that taunt available. I haven't actually had a chance to see it. Rapper could be in some trouble. We'll get caught out into that crystallized curse from Vote, but it's Geb. It's level 3. Not really a whole lot of kill potential just yet for the Oni Warriors, unless Emilito and Raffer have to go very far out of position for that.
Now, on top of that, too, I will mention the World Weaver in mid lane from Neath going to be very impactful, and that's what I think Valkyries could play off in this early game. Having these World Weavers go to one of the side lanes, potentially, or into the jungle, where Johnny's looking for a gank, is kind of the strategy I would expect them to play through this early to mid-game, and then wait for the team fights, where Warriors I expect to be the initiators with someone like Circuit, but that would require them to play around the Geb a little bit more, too.
It's tough to play around those Geb shields as well, because with Geb, especially on single target focus from Circuit, that's every Geb's dream, because it makes it so much easier to understand when to look for the disengage and peel for your team. But I love the fact that Zeros is on this Neath. Having that global ultimate is just such a strong way to facilitate map pressure.
Definitely, and I think the one thing you realize is this is a dive comp from Warriors too. A lot of deep gods that can go in. I think from Geb's point of view, though, going up against a Sobek isn't his dream scenario, though, and if I'm honest. Like, Sobek has a lot of stuff that there's not a whole lot Geb can do about. Knockups aren't the greatest thing to try and deal with shields, And on top of that, the pluck, well, the initiation of that, you could put the shield on, but you're still going to go for a ride.
Well, that's exactly why the focus here from the Warriors should really just be trying to hammer down onto Raffer, because the early game is by far the most punishable period for this Geb. It's right before he gets that insane tankiness from those Geb shields. Nielma, though, could find himself in a spot of trouble if he's not careful. Will pluck to safety, and Johnny just continues to show presence in that mid-jungle.
Yeah, it does manage to get those oracles on the left-hand side, and that's what Neomar was trying to slow down there if he could, or prevent from happening. Emilito and Vote both now level 5, as Rafa is still at only level 4 here alongside Neomar. Rafa once again going for the Thieves Rush earlier on, whereas Neil has picked up those tank boots too. We will get to see if Rafa goes for this strategy again of not going with the boots. Obviously, it's the talk of the town right now, but by next week, no one's going to remember this.
He might only be hurting himself, though. It's a risk versus reward situation there, Hindu, because I can't hate on the wing blade. It's just...
Me neither.
You definitely slow a lot of that CCR reduction. It's so nice to have with the reinforced Greaves. Greaves, by far, one of the best items that the game has to offer currently. So for Raffer to just...
In terms of defense, right?
Yes, and for Raffer to continuously forfeit rushing those first on a god like Geb, who is the most punishable in the early game, that's just another reason why I think the Oni Warriors should definitely be looking to focus him out, because that lack of reduction in crowd control could cost him his life.
Well, I'm looking to see what Valkyries choose to do here so far, because I expect Cuvo will farm for a little while longer. But now that Zeros is level 7 here, I want to see these World Weavers trying to be fired off to a side lane. Problem is, though, is like potential of kills, really. I mean, it's King Goth is probably the better option in my eyes over the Chernobog, or would you say different?
Could be.
Sure.
It could be problematic. I don't imagine that the Valkyries will try to commit much effort towards that solo lane. They might just let Nika and Ducky brawl it out, because both Sun Wukong and King Arthur are going to have their presence in team fights regardless. It's really just going to come down to which side is going to have the better follow-up. And with these given compositions, I am leaning a little bit more towards the Valhalla Valkyries. I think that their mid-game pressure could just overwhelm that of the Oni Warriors, and Nika could actually be in some trouble right now. Will eat that World Weaver out of the Neath, but spins away underneath the tower. Ducky having already committed to the Tiger Stun off of that 72 transformations. Won't find a kill just yet.
I will say real quick on that moment, because of the fact that Will Weaver was coming in, I was like expecting a bit more damage there to connect onto Nika, but the build that Zeros has gone for here, got the attack speed boots online earlier, it's not going to ton of power on that. Without Transcendent stacking online, won't do a lot. Nice blink from Rapper though as Neilmar engaged. Cubo knocked up and deleted by the Valhalla Valkyries. Dardas could only really watch on and get a bit of poke on to Ratha. Great counter initiation from Ratha there.
Cubo was not expecting that pressure, but also Neilmar plucking a Geb who has his ultimate ready to fire off into your boy without purification beads. Cubo might have just been set up by Neilmar for that punish.
It was definitely a good recognition from Rafa though, but Cuvo going for Blink this game at the start, no beads available. If he can find that target, we kind of saw it with Johnny finding first blood there on Cuvo too in the early game, going for the Blink, can come back to haunt you if you get aggressed on in the jungle consistently.
Yeah, Johnny is loving this right now. He's already got about a level, maybe even a level and a half up on Cuvo, which is going to force this Circuit into a tight position because Suki does some decent damage, especially towards the mid-game, and with the way that Johnny is opting for in his build pathway. Looks as though he's leaning towards an early Transcendence, and when you've already got jungle pressure going on, it's just tough for the Oni Warriors to try and look for that punish like we were talking about onto the Geb, because Neilmar, he can't, it's right to look for Raffer, but you can't pull him into your jungler that doesn't have beads.
Yeah, there's definitely a window until the tank gets online where you start to not be able to focus them as much. We've seen that yesterday too, and continuing on through the season, but Thebes is already stacking there for the Geb, so the health pool's higher just by buying Thebes in the first place. So you've got to make sure you can whittle down that in the early game. Neil always going to be hunting though for a kill, both the supports at equal level. Back towards the junglers though, and Cuvo is a little bit behind now, only a level though, even though he has fallen down twice in this early stage. I will say junglers, I feel this season more than anything, Taco, really are feast or famine in terms of if they get behind, they really seem to struggle.
And it's definitely looking like a little bit of famine here for Cubo. He's been forced to split just about everything with Dardas there in mid lane, and Neilmar having a third-party split as well. He's not going to be feeling it too much just yet. It's more so as that mid-game continues to develop, and with that Gorp having just been taken, Gold Fury being a potential if Valhalla Valkyries can continue to be consistent with these picks in the mid-jungle.
And you mentioned the Gold Fury there as well. I think Valhalla Valkyries have a really good opportunity to take some of these objectives with the shred they're going to have. Assault and a Neath on their team, pretty good damage.
Good consistency for objective burst as well. I think that they by far have a much more secure confirmation on those objectives as opposed to Dardas and Vo. It might be a little bit more problematic for that Tiamat and the Chernobog to actually look for heavy confirmation. And Valhalla Valkyries, I mean, the lead's not that drastic. For only having 2 picks, it's not even at 1,000 gold just yet. So this is definitely not over by any means for the Oni Warriors, but it has definitely sent the message that Warriors are going to struggle with trying to force these early initiations.
And now onto this in the mid lane now as we check in with Zeros again. Just going to backflip away for the time being. Boots are online for Geb this time round, so Ref is off the PTS for this game. But he will be back to it next week for sure. And we'll see how this one continues on for them. 9.5 minutes in, and a lot of focus has been around the mid lane so far this game. The side lanes have really been left unintruded on from both the junglers so far.
And it just comes down to the fact that Kivo has Purification Beads, but Purification Beads too late for Johnny. Pluck's gonna hit. Neilmar could be in some trouble though, as Tsukiyumi will commit the final blow, and he should go down. Poison does spread to Zeros.
It does, but Kivo's gonna get out of the fight. Ducky and Nika into the fray though, when they're hunted onto Zeros. Juggled into the air by Nika. Beads forced out, and the body block from Dardas to prevent the escape route gives the kill to Nika. But Dardas is gonna turn tail, being chased by another man with a tail, the monkey Ducky. He'll get the kill, and Vote swiftly swoops on him from the duo lane, and that's the power of these global rotations.
Vote probably feels so good right now after what he went through yesterday, and now he's the one that's getting to finally push somebody underneath their T1 tower. A great counter punish though from the Oni Warriors. That was a heads-up rotation out of Nika, and his force was one to be reckoned with. The King Arthur just seemingly getting the better end out of that engagement in comparison to the Wukong.
Two initiations though, where we've seen both the supports blinking just as an initiation was going onto them. Rafa got initiated on earlier, finds that pick onto Cuvo with that fight, and there it was Neil initiating that conversation, finding the pluck, setting up the initial damage, but more importantly, I think it was the rotations from both those solos.
The solo lane rotations definitely seem to catch the Valkyries off
trouble.
guard. And
He's got no beads.
No beads, but he does have a Geb shield, although won't be able to prevent his health bar going down. Neilmon could be in some trouble here, though. Zero's looking for a little bit further commit, but they spot out Nico on the rotation. Everybody's just going to scatter.
I will say I do think Cuvo could have had an opportunity for a kill there onto Johnny, but I think he was a bit worried about rotations from the mid lane or even solo that stopped him from getting further aggressive. Maybe a Billy's on cooldown as only warriors now start to hunt around this right-hand side of the map. Blue buff is spawning momentarily, and that's why Cuvo and Neil are here. Johnny's on the way, though, and Johnny noticed just as he walked through the jungle that, nope, I am not going alone, and that's why Rafa's showing his face too.
Not sure that Warriors should give this one up so easily. Johnny's beads are still down for another minute, and even with Rafa having those Geb shields, it would still be problematic because Cuvo does have his ultimate available, and that last breath could definitely do some nasty damage to Johnny.
I think the biggest difference there was Ducky just pushed in that solo minion wave, and in fairness to Nika, he's like, listen, let me get my farm first before you try and take anything away. We want to make sure we get those minions. I don't lose half my tower to a full minion wave, and make sure I stay ahead in this solo lane.
And I think it's important to note the different build pathways as well between these two solo laners. It might be part of the reason why Nika's presence was a little bit more felt in that mid lane engagement. That Stone of Gaia rush just gives him so much HP. It's really tough for carries to deal with that much health early on because they don't necessarily have... Zeros doesn't even have the Aussie online for flat pen yet, so it's just really annoying trying to chip away at all that health.
And I will say those health builds, you're looking to get your chins maybe, but is Neith really someone that you want to have chins with if you can help it? And then you've also got the Soul, which, you know, I guess you can go for the Soul Reaver, but even then, on a Soul, it's not the greatest thing in the world for you. We'll see how this plays out, though, as the health build comes through. It did get a bit of a nerf, though, Stone of Gaia. It's not as regenning when you do get knocked up anymore. However, a couple of knockups in this game to think of. Geb consistently, and then on top of that, Ducky if he goes into that Ox form. So just see if they can try and play around that regeneration Nika will have. Right-hand side grouping again from the Warriors here, though. Looking to just try and isolate people on this right-hand side of the map, and they found Johnny here with Nika's rotation from solo. Ducky's trying to get in here, but Vote on the way too, and Johnny realizes he's all alone. Great World Weaver coming in through from Zero's, a little bit too late now. And Ducky, who has rotated a little bit late to that fight after Nika pushed it in, managed to find a bit of trouble for himself and has to use his ultimate. All 5 of the Warriors on the right-hand side, and they're going to go for the Pyromancer.
Just too much of a swarm there from the Oni Warriors. Even if Zero's connected with that World Weaver a little bit sooner, it wouldn't have made that much of a difference. The only thing it prevents is Ducky trying to get aggressive with the steal. Instead, he loses purification beads in the process. Could be initiated on, might be forced into the cloud. And
he's got no ult. He just used it in the last combat. Cuvo will slip the noose there. Left-hand side, Amelito does at least get that tier 1 tower. Now he's going to take a fight with Vote, knowing Vote doesn't have his ultimate available. But Amelito can't thread those basics enough to cause problems for him. Instead, he'll return to this purple buff for a second. And Vote's got a bit of a decision. Minion wave or buff. However, Amelito doesn't know where the Oni Warriors are, so he's going to be playing this careful.
Vote is actually getting the much better end of Amelito here. Really nice placement on that Crystallized Curse. And the main issue is that Vote even opted for the Aussie as that third item. He has a ton of sustain right now coming from that fully stacked Devos. The Death's Toll as well. You have to remember the passive on that's going to give you a little bit of HP regen as well. So unless some anti-heal starts coming through very soon here for the Valhalla Valkyries, they could find themselves having some issues killing this Chernobog.
Huge lead for Nika, though, in that solo lane. Now 4-0 and 2, 3 levels over Ducky on that right-hand side of the map. And we kind of mentioned for a moment or two, the first 10 minutes of the game, nobody paid attention to the side lanes whatsoever. But that's a 3-level established from Nika. I don't really know where it came from other than the rotations for those fights.
It really was as simple as that mid lane rotation. Ducky dying and Nika having the opportunity to actually continue farming throughout that duration just gave him a small enough advantage. And you give Nika anything and he's just going to run away with it. And
look at this, though, the Gold Fury. Yeah, and Rafa's here, but what can Rafa really do? He needs backup from his team, trying to keep eyes on. Would look for a blink, but nice use of the Beast minion there from Dardes, just to put Rafa in combat so he doesn't have that blink opportunity, and also not put himself out of position in doing so.
Great control right now from the Oni Warriors. It was looking a little problematic, I'll admit, at the start there for Cuvo. He was definitely getting pretty focused and punished for that early blink as opposed to the beads. But these rotations out of Volt, the rotations out of Nika, they have more than made up for the rest of the map pressure here. And the main thing to also keep in mind is that Neilma has been pretty relentless with these Sobek plucks. Even when it's cost him his life at times, he's still just applying steady pressure.
Well, Amelito didn't realize Neilmar was there, so we'll use the disapparate for a second or two. Still be able to get the wave, and with Rafa rotating, should be in an okay spot on that left-hand side of the map. Soul Eater coming online for Johnny now as well for a bit more extra sustain in these engagements, a bit more damage as well from that item. We'll see how this works out. Not a ton of penetration so far on either side.
Still waiting to see who's going to be the first to try and lock in that anti-heal for the Valkyries. And Dardas as well, been relatively quiet so far this game, and we haven't really had much of a chance to really break down what this Tiamat is supposed to provide for the team, but I think the damage could be an issue whenever the first Fire Giant dance starts to actually form, because Nika is just going to be a lot more consistent of a frontline right now. He's got an item advantage over Ducky. He's also got a much more defensive-based build that's going to prevent, and with that Pestilence being finished off, these Soul Leaders between the Tsukiyomi and Sun Wukong definitely going to be a little bit less impactful if they're within that range.
Well, the side lane tier 1 towers for the Warriors going down here. Even though the Warriors got a Gold Fury, Pyromancer had a couple of wins in teamfights as of late. The lead isn't huge in terms of gold. It's only 2,000 now. Sure, Warriors can answer that back by getting those side lanes themselves, but it looks like Warriors are kind of grouping towards mid again at the moment as Nika is here. Pluck onto Johnny does connect. A good beads from him and a shield after the fact there to make sure that Johnny doesn't go for a wild ride. But a big group and a big blinking on Zeros. And he's up, down, has to beads away. Flip away from the damage from Dardas too. Cubo's around the back though. Just keep an eye on him. He's going to lurk as Nika still frontline. Vote swoops on into the front side. Rafa going to try and tank up what he can, but again he gets pulled by Neil Mar. Neil should go down in trade as Ducky comes in though. And they're looking for the Moonlight on towards Dardas on the backside of this engagement. But the backup was there from Cubo, Fred, and Vote. Cubo's ultimate saving the life of Dardas. And now Zero's still under pressure. No Aegis, no life.
Cubo actually going to go ahead and clean up Zeros on his exit wave from the T1 tower. A nice dive there from the Valhalla Valkyries. It looked like it was going to be a promising fight for them, but instead it gets turned in an instant. Great patience by Cubo on that Circuit ultimate. Just punishes Johnny the moment that he tries to full commit onto Dardas. And the fact that the Tiamat survives here and Zeros dies in the process. Sure, the Valhalla Valkyries won't be losing their T1 tower any buffs just yet. Fortunate that their buff cycles were, in fact, on cooldown. It's primarily just the fact that that's a pretty big gold swing for all those lasses that just took place, particularly for Cubo, as it looks as though he might be building into a Pridwin. And that amount of CDR, once he gets the 40% CDR, is just going to make him an absolute nuisance for this Neith. Her not having any sort of CC immunity on that ultimate, she's relying pretty heavily on Raffer's Geb shields for cleanses, but Raffer had expended it already on Johnny. Oni Warriors knew it, they took full advantage of it and just dove.
Good window as well now for the Oni Warriors here around the Pyromancer, because the beads being down for Valkyries in the mid lane on Zeros and on Johnny in the jungle. Rough situation for those guys to step up against Neil Mar. Neil, quite happy, as you were saying earlier, to just keep trying to pluck. And in that game, Shimon there in the mid lane, he initiated on Johnny early before the whole situation happened. And that just put pressure immediately onto the backline of Johnny being able to get in and cause issues.
It's just a constant guessing game when you're dealing with Sobek plucks at a competitive level, because you never know if there's going to be immediate follow-up or not. So Neilmon just doing a great job to continuously force those relics, make that Tsukiyomi much less of a threat whenever he's actually looking for commit, because if he does try to commit that ultimate, what happens when he follows his target through? He gets Turket poisoned off of it immediately, and that's just the last place you want to be, because it's just such a halt to the counter dive from the Valkyries. And also, Emilito just, it's not even by any fault of his own, he just doesn't have an ult that transfers him from one side of the map to the other immediately.
All he can do really is there push or rotate, and if you rotate and the fight's already over, you could have just farmed, but you've got to make the right call, I guess. It's a catch-22 almost.
And Vote's been doing a great job at ensuring that that dual lane wave stays very pushed out. That way Emilito doesn't really get any opportunity to try and look for some counter split push to give his team a nice little gold lead swing. It's just unfortunate, really, that you have a Soul facing off against the Chernobog, and Vote has just been beating him to the punch every single time. It might be worthwhile for Emilito to just start grouping with his team and just forego, because he's already got the T1 tower in duo lane.
True.
And he knows that he's never going to beat Vote immediately to any sort of team fight unless he's already preemptively there.
Well, Emilito at the moment is on the right-hand side of the map by the Pyromancer, and that T1 to the left could be another bit of threat. That'll see Johnny go over there to farm that minion wave up. Ducky, meanwhile, has caught up a little bit on Nika, I was going to say, but still 2-level differential as Nika has now just hit level 20, and he has upgraded that Bluestone now too to the next level. We'll see what can continue on in this one. It's all going to be around this Oni Fury next, so I think Taco.
Oni Fury seems like the play right now for the Oni Warriors, and not only that, keep in mind, Neilmaw with this upgraded Horrific Emblem could put a real damper on these double Hunter type compositions, and Johnny actually going to get caught out, forced with his beads, and just forced underneath his T1 tower yet again, but 40% HP, Oni Fury's free for the taking.
But the rotation comes in from Valhalla Valkyries, and Neilmaw uses the lurk in the water there. Johnny did use a lot, though. The beads being down is going to cause a bit of a problem for him in the next engagement.
Decent sustain.
Again, but this is the same timing as the last time we saw an objective. Now it's going to be pressure for Johnny of where he can get him without his beads. Nika juked and knocked up by the shockwave. Oni Fury down to half. Nika frontlining, gets stunned out. Half health for Nika at the moment now. The whittle down from Valkyries has been good. Cataclysm comes out onto Neilmaw, and Neil could be in trouble after the dunk from Ducky, plucked away to safety. And Cubo Fred didn't like that idea as well. The Warriors have to turn tail, all at half health there. Meanwhile, the Valkyries in a good position.
An incredibly awkward grouping from the Warriors so far as Oni Fury continues to go down lower and lower. Valhalla Valkyries will secure, but Darda is looking for the cleanup after the fact. Oni Warriors choosing now to try and surround the likes of the Valhalla. Vote's going to get one onto Raffer and still looking for another. Ducky could very well be the next to fall, but Johnny might just wiggle away.
Yeah, Vote's hurting a lot and will get the kill. Meanwhile, Nika gets the kill on Johnny. As the Valkyries get the Fury, their team composition explodes as they all get a bit discombobulated based off what was going on. And now the Warriors find themselves, well, if you look at the graphs, you can see even though they lose the Fury, they still have a pretty good window there in terms of extended golden experience.
Well, Oni Warriors might be content to give up that Oni Fury if they're able to actually confirm this Fire Giant. And the main thing to point out is that was just incredibly awkward from the Oni Warriors to begin with. They were just letting Nika get free casted on by the Valhalla Valkyries. It didn't seem as though they were fully set up and in position to fight, so seemed like a little bit of miscommunication at the start, but they definitely brought it back together, took full advantage of the Valhalla Valkyries having to tank up that Oni Fury in such an awkward way as well, and the punish was definitely felt. I don't think the Valhalla Valkyries, it was in their best, even with the number advantage, they had already expended so much just trying to take down that Oni Fury. It would have been in their best interest to just try and bail immediately.
After you've got it, get out, basically, yeah. I think Warriors did a good job, though. I mean, in fairness, when you look at what happened there, Nika frontlines for a while, eats a ton of damage. Then you have Neilmaw ends up dying, but he ate a ton of damage too. Meanwhile, the backline for Warriors were kind of untouched there, so they were kind of able to sit, wait for their opportunity. And once Valkyries did get that Fury, that's when the Warriors got aggressive all of a sudden again and made that play happen for themselves. So now we're at a point in the game where either side could still take this one. However, Valkyries, they're looking better still, I would say, based off what we saw out of last season. They did do a good performance against Warriors in Phase 1. Could this be again here today? We'll find out. Zero's, though, only level 18. You can see the experience still matters in this game.
Level 20, though, for Emilito, so there is one strong Hunter factor here, even though it is the Soul for the magical ADC damage. But I'm keeping eyes on Vote, trying to determine whether or not he's going to go for a Rage or opt for the Deathbringer just to enhance those Wind Demon crits even further. At this point, he's really open-ended for either or. I don't think it really hurts him to be up against the Gebier, because when you take a look at Ducky's build, he's got the Spectral, sure, but he doesn't have a whole lot of HP to really work with it. So even getting crit for 300 or so is definitely going to make a difference against the Sun Wukong, and I'm just not sure that Ducky's going to be able to provide the frontlining factor that the Valhalla Valkyries might need for this siege.
Kivo still going to keep wrapping around the back here as the Tier 1 falls in the mid lane for the Warriors with the Fire Giant around all 5 members of the Warriors. Valhalla Valkyries do not feel like getting too aggressive here. Rafa will be the front line for the most part. He's waiting for people to step up, really, and looking to use that Cataclysm if possible. But Warriors looking to split the difference now. Kivo to the left-hand side, Tier 2 tower in his sights, as Warriors continue the pressure in mid.
Smart from Kivo, but could be dangerous for the Oni Warriors. Instead of Valhalla Valkyries, they'll opt to forfeit both these T2 towers just rather take their engagements underneath the Phoenix, where arguably the fight would be best, especially with Raffer having that Cataclysm on the Geb ready to fire off at any given moment for whoever chooses to die first. And I'd imagine it'll likely be Nika looking for a blink initiation with this King Arthur.
I think Warriors being very respectful as well. I think they realize that Valkyries will be a counterpunch in these games. Like, if they do initiate hard and go to the back line, the Valkyries can give as good as they get on their reinitiation. So they're kind of staggering these engagements, I feel like. A pluck from Neil, wait a few seconds, reset, look for the pluck again, instead of just fully committing.
They're just trying to see what relics Neil can force. And now, it's primarily just been Johnny's Purification Beads or Ducky's Beads. And either or works out great for the Oni Warriors because, again, it's like you said, they don't have to force the commitment right away. You can take your time, especially when you have the Fire Giant advantage. And it seems as though the Oni Warriors are just going to utilize that little bit of a siege they did onto the T2 towers, taking out the Pyromancer. Vode's going to be able to finish off that Deathbringer. And right now, it's maybe a little bit too close for the Oni Warriors to look for an immediate Phoenix push. I think that they would rather just play it safe, given that they weren't able to find any sort of pick opportunities against the Valkyries. Valkyries making the right choice, not overstepping their boundaries, even with Cuvo on the split push. You want to be in a team fight environment where Zeros and Emilito actually get the opportunity to free cast, and a man down is it's still a little bit close.
So that's the one thing Warriors really have going for them, is the rotation ability of this team. The mobility of Circuit, the mobility of Chernobog of all things too. And then the split push of those minions from Tiamat can come in handy a little bit too, just to continue that on. Fury's about to spawn on this left-hand side. It's a Primal Fury, and you can see Warriors are playing this, in my opinion, slow but correctly. They're not trying to force the game end already, even with the Fire Giant. They find the towers, they strip the jungle, and then they look to go again at the FG by the looks of it.
Well, one of the main problems right now for the Valhalla Valkyries is that they just have no way to really touch Vote. They have to overcommit so hard just to get close to that Chernobog, and they don't even necessarily have the burst that you would want to take out that ADC immediately, because they do have the Neath and Soul, but the odds of Vote being standing right in front to eat a Stellar Burst or a Supernova, it's practically never going to happen. So it's just forcibly cautious from the Valhalla Valkyries right now. And Oni Warriors, granted, they're still going to be respectful because they know how much shred damage there is behind a Neath and a Soul, but I'm not even sure that Johnny's much of a threat right now to the Oni Warriors. They've been doing a great job at peeling him off the moment that he tries to dive.
You mentioned a little bit earlier on about anti-heal from the Valkyries for the Warriors. What is it you consider about in terms of who's healing on the Warriors that you're worried about?
Well, it's primarily Vote. He's the main one that you need to take out. And even King Arthur sustain can be a little bit problematic. So big as well, mild form of self-sustain. It's just, you want ways to consistently kill that front wing, and it's going to be a lot more difficult when you don't actually have that anti-heal proc to apply, because it's just going to take so much investment from Zeros and Emil. They hardly ever get opportunities to fully free cast on Nika like what we saw from the Oni Fury, and even when they did, they expended so much that Nika had, in a sense, already done his duty. He forced the cooldowns that he needed to.
See a lot of pings on that left-hand side too, realizing that there is minions pushing for Tiamat on that left-hand side and the Warriors, so this pressure here is working out in the Warriors' favor, as Valkyries can't really send anyone back to defend that on that left-hand side. Will mention, as we talk about sustain, these two males of renewal, Neilmar and Rafa both have one. I think this one's been, you know, circling, being brought up a little bit more now. Good protections that stack up, but more importantly, in my opinion, the protections are great, but you also get a bit of a heal that goes to your team too, very much like a soul gem that we see on the side of Dardes here. We'll see if that goes in as Cuvo blinks in on Johnny, but didn't find the kiss. Johnny read the situation well, and that blink down is now available, not available, I should say, for Cuvo. Fred, both teams edging their bets in this one at the dance at the FG.
It's really just the leverage for ward positioning. Ducky can be the first one plucked in, and good damage, though, from Dardes through the Geb shield of it all, but Neilmar return damage as well from Valhalla Valkyries. His pre-win proc will be applying, but a nice blink initiation. It's all hell breaking loose.
Full focus on Johnny, whose beads are down. Cuvo still going in, looking for the kiss if he can find it, and he will. The shield, though, will prevent some of that damage as the all turns attention to Cuvo. Ducking the backside, taking on 4, just trying to buy time for the team. Does a great job of that, but the bad news is Valkyries couldn't find the pick onto Cuvo Fred. That was a good fight from Valkyries. They're in a much better state of affairs in terms of health bars. Relic situation, mainly invested from Raph and just the beads down from Johnny.
Unfortunately, it might not have been enough for the Valhalla Valkyries to get a clean pull onto this Fire Giant. Nika, having already found his way back to the objective, he'll just chill in solo lane, waiting for an opportunity to possibly look for another Beats Force, but good vision from the Valhalla Valkyries. They're bound to know that Nika is going to start making his approach, and the problem here, Hindu, is just trying to get a good clearing of vision in your team's favor, and the Oni Warriors have definitely struggled with doing so, and now that Fire Giant actually ticking over into the EFG territory.
Good point, because that will be a game ender almost for either side who takes this one now then. Ducky finds the stun on Nika on the front line. Nika trying to whittle down some health bars, causing confusion. Giving time for Donis to just set up and force those tornadoes to cause damage. Johnny Dougal with no beads in the air. Rafa's Cataclysm does hit too, but Kivo to the back again, looking at Johnny. Great shield, but it won't be enough to prevent some of the damage coming through. Poison still ticking away as Ducky tries to cover him. Vote swoops on in, looks for the kill on Johnny, and finds it on the tail end. Meanwhile, Donis does also pick up Zeros, who has isolated the whole of the Valkyries, tried to protect Johnny, leaves Zeros exposed, and now Warriors have a chance of the enhanced Fire Giant.
And Nika is just creating so many entryways for Cuvo to start applying pressure into that backline. Johnny not even getting an opportunity with the Tsukiyumi. Dardes actually zoning for his team right now. It doesn't even need to be that enhanced Fire Giant with 2 clean picks onto the Valkyries, and it really just boils down to Nika finding another nice blink initiation with this King Arthur. Cuvo having the immediate follow-up, and even through the Geb Shield, it's just too problematic with Cuvo on these cooldowns. That 40% just makes him so problematic with how wiggly he is.
Good kiss from Ducky. Cuvo then. Ultimate available again thanks to the Pridwing cooldown reduction. Ducky forced away. Ryan Phoenix under threat, and Amelito can only watch on as it falls. Warriors could have looked for the end there potentially. Instead, they'll fall back knowing there's a few seconds on respawn for Johnny and Zeros, and maybe just look to set up territory on the left-hand side now. I will say, I'm loving what I'm seeing out of Neil and Nika on this team. I think those two together are really showing how to play the front line effectively. One goes in, initiates, the other one waits. Then that one goes in as the other one disengages. It's a really good battle to try and keep track of them.
And that's what you need to do against a Geb. Raffer has just been all over the place, but again, he only has 1 Geb shield cleanse, and as soon as it's expended, it's just so much easier for the Oni Warriors to focus everyone elsewhere, and that's been the primary issue here for the Valkyries. They haven't really been able to depend on Ducky as that steep frontlining factor because the Oni Warriors have so much dive available. Sun Wukong just can't cut the distance with how split these team fights are getting due to the global ultimate presence out of Vote.
Well, now with that Fury going down too, even more pressure coming towards the Valkyries' defense. The Riot and Phoenix being down, someone's going to have to pay attention to it, probably at the same time as Warriors look to engage. So expect a split fight here. Do you have Johnny go for that, and then, or is it Neith? I'm kind of like, they're the only two I can really see. You send Neith there because she can World Weaver in, or Johnny so he can turn up late to the fight.
Johnny late to the fight might be best at this point because every single time he's showed his face prior to the engagement starting off, it's been him eating all of the punches so far and eating all of the Valhalla Valkyries' prime cooldowns that they would like to use for immediate counter initiation. It's just all been about trying to peel this Suki, and even then they can't keep him alive. But with Nika now hovering on that right-hand side, could be a little bit of a pincer here onto Johnny underneath this mid-Phoenix.
Or even the left-hand side, because Nika's just walking the base, remember, too. Enhanced Oni fire minions, I should say, on the right-hand side coming down 2 next. And if Johnny's getting taken out by Nika 1v1 at the back of the shop, the shield comes through to keep him alive. But all the while, this is giving the Warriors a time to get the left-hand Phoenix, time to get the middle Phoenix, and time for those minions on the right-hand side to whittle through. This could be game as Valkyrie's in trouble.
Great crits there onto Jucky, and he won't even get a chance to get peeled. Raffer is going to drop whatever he can as far as cooldowns are concerned, but it might be too little too late here. 2 members already dead for the Valhalla Valkyries. Looking to be a third. No, instead it's going to be the Titan focus out of the Oni Warriors as they claim game number 1.
Well, it took the 3.5 minutes, I would say, there for the Warriors to put that one to bed, but it was a good battle back and forth between the two. I'm not upset with how Valkyries played that. I think Warriors played it very, what's the word I'm really looking for here? Just cautiously. They chose the right moments when to get aggressive. Yeah.
It was very thoughtful aggression the entire way through from the Oni Warriors, and if fight looked even somewhat problematic, they were immediately bailing, and it was just causing so many issues for Raffer. It's tough for one Geb to keep track of all that.
Yeah, I completely agree. I love the focus on that. Game 2, though, will be after this break. We'll break down game 1 and see if Valkyries can bounce back.
I'll point at it. Pull up. We gon' do that. Pull up. Say pull up. Run it back. Say pull up. I said pull up. Say pull up. Say pull up. Yeah. She get to the cash when she walk. She look like a bad when she walk. She get to the cash when she walk. She look like a bad when she walk. Girl, do it, do it, do it, do it, do it, do it. Girl, do it, do it, do it, do it, do it, do it.
Welcome back, everybody. After an impressive Warriors victory, they are now one game away from besting the Valhalla Valkyries here today. But before we break down the rest of what happened in that game, I got to let you know that we have an awesome giveaway going on in the chat right now. Alienware is hooking us up with 5 25-inch gaming monitors. These things are absolutely nuts. You definitely want to get your hands on them. If you want to enter the giveaway, just either visit the pinned tweet on @SmitePro on Twitter, or you can use !giveaway in the chat for an entry link. It is open to US and Canada only and closes July 13th. So make sure you're getting on that quickly if you want to get your hands on one of those 5 25-inch Alienware gaming monitors. Anyways, going back to this game, Mifflin, look, it was going well for the Valkyries. They got first blood. Zeros was ahead on the Neath. Johnny was doing well on the Tsukiyomi. Fred was behind on the Circuit. And then Nika rotated. And then the Warriors won. That's kind of the way it felt.
That does kind of break it all down. Maybe you forgot your chair 1 here, Aggro. I was supposed to be me doing that. Now I got to go a little bit deeper on the analysis. Tough pull for me here. But I think you're absolutely right that it was Nika diff. I don't think anyone can dispute that fact. It's reflected in the slash line, the damage output, even just the lane presence that he had. But we can go even further back. Let's go all the way back to the land of P's and B's. They had the opportunity to remove the King Arthur from the board. They could have banned it. Instead, they banned Ullr. They could have picked it. Instead, they took Sun Wukong. It just felt like, to me, the Valhalla Valkyries have a lot of reliance on their draft. They know that this can work, but they're still struggling to find that 25-minute mark from even. Even when they were ahead, we saw them try and push their lead. You can't push a lead when Nika's rotating around like this, though. You got to play around that solo laner. He absolutely makes his presence known in this one.
Yeah, almost disrespectful in my mind to ban the Ullr instead of the Arthur. To be like, yeah, we're cool with this happening to us. And Nika certainly made him pay. Vote having a really good game on this Chernobog as well. A fantastic slash line for him, a 10.5 KDA. Was really able to get involved in these team fights that were happening in mid. And when you're just willing to leave the Chernobog on the island, this is oftentimes what's going to happen to you. I mean, in the early to mid game, a lot of times you want to be taking the fight to the Chernobog. When you're fighting around mid instead, it's very easy for the Chernobog to affect that fight without Emilito being able to do so himself. And I think that's pretty well reflected here on the slash lines.
Completely agree. It's just concerning to me that the Valhalla Valkyries had such a good start to this one. It was legitimately one team fight flub, about 11 minutes into this one, completely cost them the rest of the match. It was a slight mechanical misplay. Zero's trying to finish off a kill at max range with his ultimate, goes down to the crouching ultimate. Well, there's a full health Tiamat right in your face, but they're not going to let that one go through. Yeah. Maybe not even the ability died before he was able to shoot it off. Just a little bit of mechanical misplays coming through. But the Valhalla Valkyries have shown yet again that they have a draft that can work. This strategy flourished in the early game, and it legitimately probably shouldn't have.
Yeah, I agree. They got off to a really good start. Johnny and Zeros were active early, and it was paying off short term, but ultimately did not. Raffer had some good ultimates in the early game, set back Fred, get to the late game, and you're behind, and that Geb just kind of, you shield him, and you kill him through the shield. Not a whole lot you can do at that point. Also worth noting, by the way, that Dardez on the Tiamat, top of the player damage charts, even though the scoreline didn't look great, was certainly able to get in there and do his job on that Tiamat. So now you're left in a position where, well, certainly shouldn't give Nika Arthur again, and we probably shouldn't give Dardez Tiamat again. I just don't know where you really go from here if you're the Valkyries.
I think you got to target out the solo lane. That's where the root cause of the problem was. Sure, Dardez has a great game. Does he do that if Nika doesn't rotate over and completely change the face of the map at the 10-minute mark? Maybe not. Maybe he still does, but we got to evaluate it from that origination of the aggression.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, oftentimes we say that when a backliner is doing well, it's because the front line is doing pretty well for you, and that was certainly the case in this game with Nika and Neil working really well together. Fred, even though he didn't put out that much damage, doing the CC that you would expect from the Circuit. I think the Valkyries, like you said, they've got their drafts that work. they had a lot of good pieces there. It's just one or two mistakes will end up costing you. And I keep thinking back to that Uller ban, man, instead of the King Arthur. Like, I don't know. Vote's really good at Uller. That's one of his best gods. If your plan is to leave Emil on an island, you don't want him to go up against Uller 1v1, but it was the Arthur that kind of ran that game there for the Warriors.
Yeah, I think if anything, have Emil be on that island. Give him the soul. Let him use the sap rate and hide behind his tier 2 tower if he has to, just so the rest of your map can do well. Because really, it wasn't Vote that won him that game. You're not worried too much about that. They were even talking about it in the interview. We got to talk to Ducky. What did he say? I'm concerned about King Arthur and Tsukiyomi, both Nika gods, both left on the table, both had the opportunity to be stripped away.
Yeah, you think they're like, all right, what should we ban here, guys? And Emil's like, we should ban Uller. And Ducky's like, can we ban Arthur? Or he like got up to get a drink of water or something like that, and he's like, what happened? Why didn't we ban? Why have to go against Arthur in this lane? I don't know what happened there for the Valkyries, but I assume that it will get remedied as we get ready for picks and bans for game number 2. Overall, it's the strategy that has worked for the Valkyries. The Warriors on the other side, I think that these games where Vote is able to get free farm over there in the duo lane and dictate his own engagements ends up working a lot better. Think back to yesterday when Vote locks in that Kronos and Jake is behind his tower waiting for him. You know, those are the games where I think the Warriors tend to struggle a little bit more. And I wonder if the Valkyries are able to switch up that playstyle a little bit, play a little bit more to the duo side, and try and set Vote behind.
Could work out, but Emil has been a largely inconsistent piece of this team so far this year. So it makes sense to me that the Valkyries are instead trying to play around some of their star players. Zero's had a lot of hype coming into him into the SBL. He's obviously has a very storied career, has been able to carry games at the Worlds level as well. So it makes sense to me that they do want to play through the 3v3, but I think you're absolutely right to bring up the fact that we haven't really seen them try to play through either side lane so far. They haven't facilitated Ducky too much, and generally at around level 6, Raffer washes his hands of the dual lane, says, all right, I'm out. I'm going to go Stone Shield anyone else. I'm not worried about you, Emil, and it hasn't worked out for him just yet.
Yeah, I think that when the Valkyries get into these mid to late game situations, they're usually pretty good at team fighting in those. ML definitely still shines at moments, particularly on the Soul when he gets into those situations, but the laning phase is still where things tend to go wrong a little bit, like that early rotation from Nika that just ends up being more impactful than what Ducky's able to do. And part of that is God selection, right? Like Arthur is just real good at that point in the game. He's really difficult to take down. Maybe the Valkyries are able to switch it up a little bit, but if the Warriors don't end up putting pressure on them early, you can't just let this Valkyries team stick around forever because they are very good once they get to that late game phase.
And that's what their drafts have been largely geared towards, that late game. They want to utilize the double hunter. They want to utilize that stone shield, that counter punch strategy that Hindu Man was bringing up towards the beginning of the cast. But when did they counter punch? Towards that late game team fight before the first Fire Giant went down. It was the only Warriors barreling straight into essentially the Phoenix of the Valkyries, and that counter punch never came. They just kind of folded.
Well, let's see if they can get it right here in game number 2. We're going to go to a quick break as we get prepped to take this set on. We appreciate your patience, and we'll be right back. Welcome back, SMITE fans. Appreciate the patience as we are ready for Game 2 picks and bans. The Valkyries in that first pick position once again, and this is where they were last time. I think that the adjustments I expect to see might start early in the banning phase. I think that Tiamat or the Arthur, those are top pick potential here for the Valkyries.
Yeah, might as well get rid of it. Ducky has shown in the past that he's capable of playing the King Arthur, which is why I was so personally surprised to see the Sun Wukong come through in that first pick slot. So I think you're right to say that the adaptations can come early, but I'm not expecting King Arthur in the ban column. Maybe we see the Tiamat, wouldn't be overly surprised if we see the Tsukiyomi as well, but I want to see the Valkyries shift up their own picks a little bit more so.
Well, the Oni Warriors don't have a whole lot to worry about changing, right? They were able to find that Game 1 victory, so they banned the Giannis just like they did last time. It is still the same ban so far for the Valkyries and the Yemoja and the Ymir. Remember, it was Chiron in that third slot for them in that ban. We'll see if that's the direction they still want to go, but I don't expect the Warriors to change up a whole lot. And it is a ban switch, but it's not who we expected, Mifflin. It's Serket for Fred, who fell behind early and really didn't bring that much damage. I guess the CC was what they're concerned about.
There were a couple of fights where the poison was able to spread and maybe change how the outlook was for the Valkyries, but it is a weird targeted ban for me personally because, look, I don't think I'm saying anything the fans at home don't already know, but that game was Nika diff through and through 100%. King Arthur available yet again to the Valkyries, as is that Tsukiyomi, but it's not the Sun Wukong locked in this time. Instead, it's the Osiris. Could be a flex pick, could go into the jungle, could go into solo, but either way, could have been a King Arthur.
Could have been a King Arthur, could have been a Tiamat, could have been a Chiron. Those are three gods that I think are all... I just don't see a world where Osiris gets picked before those three gods, right? That's where my disconnect is here, is that the Valkyries, yeah, they're waiting to see what they want to do with their draft. That Ducky is almost certainly getting the short straw here, that they're getting they're top picking his god so that the rest of them can counterpick their matchups. But I just don't know what you're worried about picking King Arthur for. You know, why are you worried about picking King Arthur early in comparison to this Osiris? I don't know. We'll see. They clearly have a lot of respect for it. They banned it in the second phase in Game 1. So clearly they think this Osiris is pretty good, and we'll see what Ducky's able to do on it. As surprise, surprise, Dardes gets Tiamat again, and they get to get the Fenrir as well for either Fred or for Neil.
And here's another adaptation from the Valkyries, Acro. Tsukiyomi locked in, and I don't think that reveals too much. Could go towards Johnny in the jungle, but still has the potential to be Osiris. We know Johnny loves playing these auto attackers out of the jungle, so I wouldn't be overly surprised if we see the God of the Afterlife there. I'm not sure that Ducky really is a huge proponent of the Tsukiyomi solo, though, and Tsukiyomi doesn't really have that flex potential in his support. So we will get a little bit more clarity on how this draft goes once we see Raffer's pick come through. But yet again, I just gotta think King Arthur's still out there, still available, still could have been taken. Osiris jungle, great flex. It would have made up a phenomenal front line, and then you could have facilitate zeros, which seems to be the strategy from the Valkyries through and through every single week. It's just a little bit of a head scratcher for me on this draft.
Yeah, Valk's throwing a bit of a curveball, but maybe that's what they need to throw, because the Warriors are hitting fastballs right now, that's for sure. So maybe switching up the pace a little bit is the right idea. Xing Chen now for Raffer. Geb-esque in how well it peels, not quite as well, but still peels very well. Better initiator, I think, a lot of the time, and much more survivable than Geb.
Much stronger early game as well. He can actually get involved at level 3 once he has all three of those abilities available, the Skyhook, the Leap, as well as the Ferocious Roar. Going to make it very easy to play through that duo lane. Has phenomenal aggression, can really synergize well with his Tsukiyomi in mid, toss someone away, burn their beads, well, all of a sudden Kusari Gamma becomes a much more large threat. The Piercing Moonlight's going to have decent targeting as well. This is a much more aggressive composition from the Valkyries. It's a huge departure from what we've seen from them in the last couple of weeks.
They had a pretty good start to the early game in Game 1, so, there's a team that we talk about their late game. They started off pretty well. It was the mid game where they got tripped up. Maybe going for a little bit more early game makes some sense here. It seems like Voda's having a bit of a long think over what he wants to play. It's been Jingwei, Rom hovers. He ends up on the Chernobog. The Chiron's still open here, Miff, but not taken.
No, Chernobog had so much global presence in the last one. Gotta think he wants to do that yet again here. We haven't seen the Valkyries take their ADC pick either, so we could see the Soul come through if it's not banned out. Emilito has been loving this pick, has additional safety. Occasionally, he'll go towards the Jingwei as well, and I think that could serve them relatively well, but I'd like to see something more aggressive, something more in line with what has already come through here from the Valkyries draft. If Chiron makes it through, I want to see Emilito take it.
Yeah, Chiron could be a really good pick for them. And Neath is still open as well for zeros if they want to go that type of direction, but The Warriors a little bit more worried about his potential Morrigan, as the Valkyries finally put some due respect on Nika's King Arthur and ban it away. They don't pick it for themselves, which is fine, but they make sure that Nika doesn't get it again, and I'm happy with this compromise, I think.
Yeah, as long as Nika isn't just doing it to him again, right? It's a great adaptation. Tsukiyomi already removed from the table, so harken back to that interview with Ducky again. Those were the two gods he was concerned about. Maybe he didn't stand up for his drink this time around and was at least able to have his way in P's and B's. But that adaptation already of the soul ban, I think, is going to put a huge damper on what the Valkyries are going for. They're already slightly physical heavy.
Yes.
They want to pick a standard mage. Zeros has been really liking that pick out of mid. That's gotta irk them a little bit.
Yeah, if they want to go Neath, I mean, you're looking at Kronos, which Vote tried to play yesterday, didn't go super well. Freya, Olarun, I mean, those are your magical hunters still left. Don't know exactly where Emel's going to go if those are the options. Of course, is Kronos legendary, but not sure. I'm not very convinced on the strength of that pick right now. But how about Apollo, a god that we really did not see a lot of in Phase 1 after his dominance at the end of Season 7. I think Apollo is probably still a little bit underrated. Transcendent's really good. Apollo likes to build that. Apollo Merlin's a pretty decent backline to pair together here, Miff. I think that the Valkyries solidified this draft pretty well in the bottom two.
No, I like this a lot. We were getting out-rotated from the duo lane pretty consistently because that Chernobog, well, Apollo's got to the sky. Going to be able to chase him down pretty easily. And the burn potential that the Valkyries were bringing to objectives, maybe not as much so in Game 2, but still definitely has a lot of it. This Merlin's going to shred Gold Fury's Pyromancers throughout the early game. Apollo, with his Audacity, is also going to be able to do the same. And then you've got a pretty stonewall front line inside of Osiris and Jing Chen. This is a very good draft. But again, it is largely different, wildly different, I'd say, from the strategy we've seen from them in the last couple of weeks. It's not that we're waiting for the 25-minute mark, we're waiting to group up as 5 and just win the fight by separating. And instead, this team, I think, needs to get involved a little bit earlier on. I'm talking pre-10 minutes. We're looking to find a lead.
I mean, their mid-game also transitions pretty well. So if that's where they lost Game 1, getting some strength in that same area makes some sense to me. I like the Apollo Merlin backline. Their dive is good between the Apollo and the Tsukiyomi and the Xingqian and the Osiris. I like what the Valks have put together, but you look on the other side, this Oni Warriors composition feels impossible to kill. I mean, who do you kill easily on this team? Chernobog dashes into the wall. Tiamat gets mitigation. Fenrir is hard to kill because of all his mobility and the build that he usually goes. Guan healing, don't want to hit the Kuzenbo. Who are you killing right now if you're going up against the Warriors?
You're hopefully killing Tiamat, right? I mean, ideal world, you're able to close gap onto him, but the peel potential from the Oni Warriors as well is ridiculous. It's not that you don't want to hit Kuzenbo, it's that Kuzenbo isn't going to let you hit anyone else. Oh, you're diving onto my Tiamat? Watery Grave. Now I'm a Beyblade and you're inside a wall and my team's already set up on you. Cavalry charge to engage means that Kuzenbo really doesn't even need to act as that frontliner. He could just sit in the back line and play goalkeeper.
Should be fun to watch. We're going to get ready for Game 2 to kick off. We're going to throw it to one more quick break. Apologies again. We'll be right back with the start of Game number 2. Welcome back, everybody. Appreciate the patience. We are nearly ready to go into Game 2. Just wanted to reset the draft and give you another look at it before we head into the second game. Mifflin, as I've been thinking about this draft on the break, as much as I like the Valkyries draft, I just don't know how they take down the Oni Warriors with their mobility and their sustain and their CC.
Well, there's miracle situations. You could have Apollo dunk somebody and have Piercing Moonlight to back him up, and just hopefully whoever the target is dies before the rest of the Oni Warriors are able to close the gap onto him. But you're absolutely right, man. This front line from the Warriors is nigh unpenetrable. It's so hard to get through. But the Valkyries have got decent tools to prime themselves to get there. If they're able to control objectives in the early, doesn't matter how good your front line is if they're 5,000-6,000 gold behind. But easier said than done to do that in the early game up against gods like Fenrir or even Guan Yu once he gets that ultimate available to him. You're right. They got their work cut out for them, and I was trying to find that silver lining. It's hard to do.
Look, hey, here's a silver lining. Vote was getting to all those fights that Emilito was unable to get to. Now Emo can get to those fights. You got 2 global ultimates over there in the duo lane. They can end up impacting fights elsewhere on the map. Maybe that will stop the bleeding in the early game if you're the Valkyries. Overall, maybe the Warriors a little low on damage with all their CC and mobility, right?
No. Tiamat has a ton of damage. Fenrir can go full tank, but then he's seeding Hal for additional power. And even if we were lacking, there's still Talu Assault to just strip away what is left of your defense. It's just a very clean draft, man.
Warriors looking good, looking poised to take game number 2 and take the set 2-0. The Valkyries looking to prevent that with this draft, looking to Raffer and what he's going to do on the Xing Chen, setting up for this fantastic backline of the Valhalla Valkyries. Let's see if they can do it. Hindu Man and Taco on the call.
So much aggro, and I appreciate that you guys at home tuning in with us and dealing with the delays, but into Game 2 we now go. Valkyries with a new draft, Oni Warriors with a similar but still different draft than last time too. The desk is talking, Taco, about who do you focus on the Warriors, and I kind of agree with him. Going to be a tricky task on who to really bring down in this game.
The hard part here for the Valkyries is that, sure, they've got a decent amount of crowd control and setup between Ducky and Raffer, but it really is just all about the mobility game here. Not to mention, the carries just have such great escapes. Dardes and Vote are going to be really tricky to lock down, but if Emilito can find some consistent ultimates with that Apollo Global, it could be a little bit of leverage in the team fight.
Well, you saw at the start there, Emilito doing something that probably won't exist next week, which is use these vines to stack that passive up for a bit of a quicker speed, attack speed, and clear thanks to Apollo's passive. Meanwhile, in the solo lane, Nika and Ducky both starting off with this Rangdars build. Is that going to stick around next week, you reckon, or is this like a 1 week special now?
It could potentially.
Really?
I think it's almost anything goes whenever the boots patch removal actually comes into play. More importantly, though, the Rangda start does make it so that it'll be a really aggressive solo lane between Nika and Ducky might even get the better end of it for the start at least, just because Guan Yu having to invest a little bit more into the melee range clear, and that's where Ducky can find some advantages. But Emilito, Raffer, stalemate so far over in duo between this Xing Chen and Apollo.
Jump in mid lane from Cuvo Fred, and funny enough, when I saw Cuvo Fred taking this Fenrir in this game when I first saw it drafted, I was expecting that to go towards Neilmar at first. So I do like the kind of adaptation from Warriors almost, the rope-a-dope with, actually it's Fenrir jungle, not in the support position, and bringing in this Kuzumbo. How do you feel about that?
Kuzumbo's more of a niche pick, and I think that's why it works so well here for the Oni Warriors, because, well, hold that thought, Cuvo could be in some trouble. Health will fall incredibly low to that Blizzard. A nice stun lock from Johnny on the Tsukuyomi, and that's definitely going to make it a little bit more problematic for Cuvo in this early game. Johnny might have the potential to actually invade his back Harpies with Cuvo's HP falling so low.
2 games in a row then, though. Johnny's just finding a bit of a better advantage in the early stages of the game, these level 2, level 3 trades towards the mid lane. But Cuvo can resustain, obviously, health potions available. He's back in the jungle and perfectly fine now as we tune back into the support lane, I should say, with both of them going blink this time round on the Kuzumbo, as Neil will push Raffer into a bit of danger. But Raffer got a lot of tank in his vote, will dash in, however, aggressively with a full minion wave. Emilito to slow that down with his use of the stun.
It didn't seem as though that hook slam actually connected with anyone either, so Raffer may be a little bit more fortunate that Vote didn't have the crystallized curses available just yet. Believe it just came back up off cooldown, and that's the problem as well for Raffer. He's got to be careful that he doesn't get trapped out, because with that sumo slam, Neilma is just throwing the Xingtian out of position constantly, and that makes it tough for Emilito to look for consistent farm.
Yeah, but for the most part, it really is just a stay in lane, survive, don't give up too much in the jungle. And even though Warriors got a bit of pressure here on the left-hand side, they weren't confident for the Invader purple buff. So Valhalla Valkyries should be able to secure the roam this time round. So we turn into the solo lane. Nika just dings level 5 at the moment. Did go for the blink, whereas Ducky went for the beads. I'm actually quite happy with the beads pickup from Ducky here. If he's going to be going for that backline, we talked about the difficulty maybe getting on these targets. Having those beads to prevent Kuzumbo maybe, or even these cavalry charge stuns coming out from Nika, could help him out quite a bit.
But at the same time, it's the fact that Nika has that blink available for the cavalry charge, which I'm assuming would be to cause a lot more issues for Zeros and Johnny over anybody else. Johnny, I think, might be the prime target here for the Oni Warriors. They made it pretty evident in Game 1 at least that they were not trying to let him have his way at any given circumstance throughout all of Game 1 with that Tsukuyomi, and I have to assume it'll be more or less the same threats here, especially with Neomon. Again, that goes back to the Kuzumbo question you were asking. Watery Grave is so strong, especially against carries that work like Zeros does with the flicker, Emilito with that dash. They're very easy to catch out and just displace constantly.
And when you think about Nico and the Guan Yu, the cavalry charge to run them down after they've used their escapes, their abilities defensively is the option. I wouldn't be surprised, like you said, to see Warriors focus towards Zeros and Johnny again this game, just like game number 1. So far, though, no kills in this one where Valkyries took a lead last time. They are up in gold at the moment, however. Just being a bit more disciplined in terms of the farming and sharing of experience across the map shows that Rafa has a lead slightly over Neil Ma in that support role.
It is a little bit odd, though, that Ducky actually opted for that Osiris first pick outright, because it does give Nika a great opportunity, I think, to understand, well, if he's going for Osiris, that's a lot of single target focus. Meanwhile, Guan Yu kind of having a little bit more, I think, of that team fighting impact, and it could potentially pose the same issue as we saw in Game 1 between that King Arthur and Sun Wukong dynamic, where Nika was just having a much easier time harassing the backline from the Valkyries.
It does feel like the way I've seen Valkyries draft so far has been, Ducky, you're the one to go up first. You have to go up to the plate, and you have to pick your pick early on.
That's not fun as solo.
But that is giving the rest of the team the option to look through the enemy draft and adjust accordingly. I think that's why we see the Apollo this game for Emilito. He knew the Chernobog was coming out to try to match that rotation. And it's also giving Zeros a bit of a window to see what he's up against in the mid lane. But as we were saying, you know, you kind of force it into a situation of a potential negative matchup in that solo lane that can be punished.
And it's also just, I'm curious to see what direction Cuvo goes with this Fenrir, because we have seen some of the stone cutting, crit-oriented type of builds of Fenrir. We've also seen a lot of those ability, more cooldowns focus, a little bit more initiation and setup type of ability. Nika, though, could be in some trouble. Lord of the Afterlife will be expended, but Spike Caltrops is not enough.
I'll tell you, just as he used that cavalry charge there, he started to spin to the right, and I was like, he's going to go back in here. He's a madman.
Thought about it.
But I think he realized like the damage off that first swing wasn't going to be as much as he was hoping for in that solo lineup against the pair of them. I will say cavalry charge, one of the strongest ultimates in the game in the early game. This first level, if you can hit every single swing on the back of that, does a ton of damage. I think the only comparable one, I would say, is a full channel Ymir ultimate in comparison.
Just no shot that Nika's looking to engage in a 2v1 scenario. However, mid lane could be a different story altogether, as Oni Warriors will group up. They're looking for this first Greater Scorpion of the game, want to start trying to apply some of that Gold Fury pressure. Vine's going to actually zone out Raffer for a moment. That gives Oni Warriors the advantage to try and look at these Oracles, but instead, it's going to be Valhalla Valkyries pulling them. Seems as though it might just be an even split down the middle here, neither side getting the advantage. Oh, cancel that. Oni Warriors actually will finish off those Oracles. Couldn't tell for a moment whether or not one had gone for the Valhalla Valkyries, but it's not the worst thing in the world. It just makes it more difficult for Valkyries to look for a Gorp pool.
Cuvo going to rotate into the jungle, look towards the red buff, but Johnny had just taken it for the Valhalla Valkyries in time before Cuvo could show his face there. And you were talking about his build. I'm kind of expecting the Fenrir to go quite bruisery this game, mainly because I think that is one focal target Valkyries could look for in these engagements. If he overextends and is squishy enough to take a ton of damage, that's a window for me. So maybe playing the Bruisery option is the best call.
Well, Bruiser might be best here just because you have such a consistent front line then between Cuvo, Nika, and Neilmaw. There's just so much peel available. It makes it really easy for hyper carries like the Tiamat, like the Chernobog to really flourish, and I think that that's the game plan here for Vote. He's already got those Devos online, and imagine his build could be very similar to what we saw out of last game, although he might not necessarily have to go for that Aussie third item. If he does, can't hate it by any means. It's just extra sustain.
But would you go, I mean, if you go with the Devourer's Gauntlets, is it still natural to go for the Executioner next in the build these times still? Or is, Assie's a flexible option?
Aussie, I think it was more desirable because he wanted to stay alive, just like Johnny trying to stay alive in mid. Will force out, or nice force out by Neil with the Sumo Slam, but on the other hand, Emilito and Raffer will get to punish the Warriors by taking the Corp. It's not a huge enhancement of gold by any means, but just little leverages of map pressure, and something to keep in mind now for both teams is that Gold Fury will be spawning shortly.
And the Fire Giant will spawn at natural time now too, with the one around there down 2. It did go the way of the Valhalla Valkyries, but it's the Warriors that will take it from the jungle and steal it away there just for a bit more experience. You can see the differential between the two. Still about 400 for Valhalla Valkyries. Hasn't changed much so far in this one. And I will talk about the Hunter builds a bit more, because as you said, Vote gone for this Devourer's Gauntlets rush, whereas Emilito going for the Transcendent start here, as well as the start item differential between the two. Death's Toll versus the Cowl. What's the reason for those?
Death's Toll is just a little bit more sustained. I actually believe it to be the strongest starter item right now for any Hunter, just because the passive is just unreasonable sustain, and when you pair that alongside of the Devo gloves, Vote now with that Ninja Tabi, he's going to be able to sit pretty in lane for a while. Meanwhile, Emilito can't really afford to take any sort of boxing engagements in that 1v1 situation because
until Lassie, right?
There's a mild amount of sustain on the Hooded Cowl, don't get me wrong. You can see that 10% physical lifesteal, but it pales in comparison to that of the Death Toll with the Devo gloves. I'd expect Vote to start applying a little bit more 1v1 lane pressure here, because all he has to do is just continuously chip away at Emilito's health. Emilito, he's just going to be a pilot this game with the Transcendence, all the mana in the world for his Chariot, but it's just a matter of power spikes, and while his autos will definitely chunk with that Transcendence now being fully evolved, and he does get the 10% cooldown on top of that, it's just still... I definitely think Devos is still the way to go if you want outright sustain and crit potential.
I guess in a way, if you want to take a boxing match what's favorable in terms of sustain options, right, versus raw power that you'll get from the Transcendence and cooldown reduction. Johnny going to get whipped around the corner. His beads on cooldown from the last engagement. Great little play from Neilmaw individually. And the swoop, there it is from Vote straight away. Make sure that Zeros can't get in the action. Raffer's going to have to force to use the ultimate. Gets the beads out of Vote. But the follow-up is there from the Warriors too. Emilito crashing in, looking for a kill. Can't find Cuvo at the tail end. Will stun Neilmaw, and a good bit of damage onto Neil. One more tower shot could do it. But it won't come through in time. Warriors find 2 kills on a swoop to the mid lane.
Those reinforced Greaves, just an absolute nuisance when actually trying to punish supports, even when they're underneath your T1 tower. And poor Melito, he just wasn't there as fast as Vote. Living Nightmare, just instantaneous.
Double kill! No,
nice
just the one. Vote just waits around long enough to realize the backs were coming through. That's happened a couple of times in this one. I feel the Warriors are definitely cheeky flankers, I want to say, with how game 1 went. They were doing it there and doing it again this time round too.
I can't even flame him for it being a lazy back by any means. That's just a heads-up play from Vote, just acknowledging the fact that Emilito would likely get a little bit greedy, wanting to split that wave with Zeros that had just been pushing in, and Zeros, honestly lucky with how close he was stacked there on top of Emilito that he didn't get caught out as well. But I'm more so taking note of the damage and pressure that Neilmaw's already been able to apply with this Kuzumbo.
Yeah.
And it's that Sumo Slam into the Watery Grave. There's just nothing left for Johnny to do. He's just forced into that CC stun lock.
And it's because the first rotation from Neil earlier on got the beads, so that time round, it causes even more of a problem. Ducky trying to keep the Pyromancer at bay from the Warriors' grasp, but Nika in the area and the rest of the team not really in position to help out now, trying to farm up their own jungle. This is Warriors fighting a small win off the back of the engagement in mid lane. And that's the big thing. I used to always say, it's stuff after the stuff. It took a bit of time there for the Warriors to find it, but they do so. And now Raffer trying to step into the jungle and slow down the rotation back.
Raffer's really just trying to see whatever he can nab, but Zeros, Raffer, they're not going to be able to find anything left over in that jungle. Scraps have already been cleaned off the table here by the Warriors, and with Pyromancer having been stripped away, now Oni Warriors, if they find another 2-pick advantage, like what we just saw go down in mid lane, they could potentially look to take the first Gold Fury this game.
But you can already see that Warriors are focusing on towards Johnny in that mid lane too, and that's going to just keep Johnny at bay, in my opinion. He's just going to have to adjust how far forward he is, because when he steps up like that, I mean, if Kuzenbo's there, what do you do? There's not really many options for him.
It's one of the downsides of playing this Tsukuyomi, because Johnny just does not have many options. You want to be the aggressor. You don't want to be the one being initiated upon, especially by the likes of a Kuzen, who pretty much specializes in keeping these less mobile junglers a lot more trapped. And when you have to deal with never knowing if Kuvo is going to be jumping in with an Unchained that has the runes stacked up for the stun or not, that's just another layer of threat that the Oni Warriors are able to apply.
As we look at the second item, I'm looking at the Relic situation too, but wait a second, Nico on the right side, a little bit too deep here. We'll have to ult defensively. Oh, Willie came down off early. This is setting Nika up, sorry, Johnny up for a nice little play. Nika could end up dying here from this decision he made by turning around to deal some damage. I was looking across the map of like, was he buying time for the team? Awkward decision from Nika there for me.
Nika could have definitely survived, and the Oni Warriors could have still pulled that Gold Fury. A little bit questionable with that cavalry charge, but he knows better than we do. He's the one playing it. Raffer going to disengage this Gold Fury pool. Emelito trying to find Kuvo. Fred will kill him with the chariot outright. So a nice power play advantage now swings into Valhalla Valkyries' favor. Oni Warriors just bit off a little bit more than they could chew there with that Gold Fury pool.
Do you not just pull gold there then, if you're Valkyries at that moment? Hang on a second, Dodd is in mid. Doesn't realize Johnny was behind him. He'll find out now. No Piercing Moonlight available this time around for Johnny though. And he will give as good as he gets. So Zero's trying to follow up and keep the pressure rolling onto Dardes, who will limp back to his tier 1 tower. But I do think Valhalla Valkyries could have looked to the Gold Fury after that engagement. They just didn't feel too confident in it.
Strange that they wouldn't feel as confident either to look for that pool, but it might also have something to do with the fact that their Hunter just doesn't have the greatest form of sustain, and Raffer would have eaten a little bit of damage. They had expended some ultimates just to get that initial force off for the Oni Warriors, so the picks are definitely satisfactory. It basically stabilizes the map pressure all over again. The main crime that took place is just the fact that Johnny and Ducky had no business killing Nika there. That was really just a bit of an oversight from Nika, thinking that he could still survive through both the Piercing Moonlight and that Lord of the Afterlife, but dying in the way that he did when he could have just straight line cavalry charged out of there.
It happens, you know?
It happens, but it's those moments where when the Valkyries, if they get map pressure,
it would have been a non-issue if they would have got the Gold Fury the first time round, but look at this, the window of opportunities there once again for the Oni Warriors. Just walk back to the pit after they all respawn, and nobody on the Valhalla Valkyries are around. They'd all based at the same time, and that's the best situation if you're a Warriors fan. Kind of frustrating if you're a Valkyries one.
Valkyries just, they do things right up until they don't. And that Gold Fury execution is, I think, a prime example of just some of the woes that have plagued this team for all of their first split and now leading into their second. It just seems as though they're a little bit too hesitant at times to want to pool objectives. Even though they expended Raffer's ultimate there and Emelito's, it's still a decent amount of burst damage, and Shred with zeros on the Merlin.
For me, it's not even that not
you could
pulling
also
it
force
right.
another fight.
It's more, they all base at the same time, and Warriors just go, well, I guess we take a Gold Fury now because no one's here to contest. Stagger in the backs. That's kind of where I'm aiming for here. As now Dodd is in the mid lane. Had a solid game on, in my opinion, on this Tiamat. It didn't look like he was doing a ton of damage, but he was. Consistent poke damage. And for me, that's what really Tiamat brings to the engagement, is consistent ability usage. It's going to cause problems, harassment all the time.
Yeah, that Primordial Onslaught definitely hits pretty hard and will start chunking as Dardes approaches that level 17 mark. Of build pretty far underway, has that Spirit of Desolation as well, so a decent amount of CDR to work with as well in comparison to Zeros.
He's got CDR too.
He's got some from the Sand Timeline and the Soul Gem, but might not be as quick to pull the trigger. Zeros has seemed a little bit more cautious with his approach into these engagements, and I think it's largely because of the fact he doesn't want to get caught out by the likes of a Kuzenbo and Fenrir.
Definitely. 17 minutes approaching then. Table Tower on the right-hand side finally goes down. And that all really started off with that gank towards Nika, where Ducky has now found a window to get a lead over Nika in that solo lane. But it really will come down to how they can both impact the team fights. Last game, Nika had a pretty good time on King Arthur. Ducky kind of struggled finding the windows on the Sun Wukong. On an Osiris pick, though, that kind of changes a little bit now. A lot more pressure, I would say, for the Warriors to deal with.
Somewhat, because Vote also just finished that Executioner, and that could be disastrous for Ducky if he's not careful with that Lord of the Afterlife, because it's a great ultimate for preventing sustain, particularly against the likes of Nico on that Guan Yu, but once it's gone, that leaves him completely open for Neilmaw to CC, for Cubo to CC, and if Vote gets a chance to actually apply some of those autos, you have to remember how Chernobog passive works. Every third strike is enhanced damage as well. And with that Exe being already online, Vote getting a little bit of abuse here, forcing Amelito underneath his T1 tower. Both these hunters can kind of just duke it out, and Vote having that nearly 1,000 gold lead over Amelito is definitely starting to be felt in this itemization disparity.
And Johnny at level 17 now has the Solar online and the Transcendence fully stacked, working a bit more penetration up next. Could be the Otans, could be a Brawlers, we'll see. But speaking of anti-heal as well, Toxic Blade picked up by Ducky this game, this time round too. I actually think that's not a bad little pickup. You're auto-attacking a lot, and you're wagging your finger looking at his last item he just picked up.
That Animosity check-in for Ducky on top of the Toxic Blade. The Toxic Blade makes perfect sense. You get that 30% attack speed that's going to play really nicely into that Animosity passive. So Ducky might just looking to take some of the carry upon himself. Mystical Mail, Reinforced Greaves, bound to provide a decent amount of protections for him to really just look to try and harass Vote here, I think.
That's a good point. I mean, to be fair, whoever he's hitting, he's going to be taking a ton more damage. So those frontline tanks, even if they are trying to keep him at bay, as long as he's holding down that left click button and swinging away those basics, he could cause a couple of problems for the Warriors. Very patient set so far between the two, I would say. Game one really took a bit of time to get going, and this one too, just being consistent. Swing to the left, swing to the right, really, from Warriors looking for an opportune moment. Meanwhile, Ducky is solo and Pyromancer here, right in front of Cuvo Fred. And Rafa is going to find Cuvo and start to keep him at bay. And whittle down that health bar already. Guan Yu on the way from Nika in the solo lane now, but too little too late, as Valhalla Valkyries use Ducky's build to their advantage.
Cuvo saw it going down, but in a 1 versus 3, and he doesn't even know who else might be lurking right behind him. It just makes a lot more sense for him to disengage there outright, as Nika now getting a little harassed here. Spirit Flail into a little bit more of the Sickle Strike damage.
Talking about getting harassed though, Rafa's getting harassed. I thought we could see Cuvo Fred get involved then at the tail end, but Rafa does a good job of keeping Neil busy to allow the Valhalla Valkyries to get their own red buff. Fury spawning soon, however. The Oni Fury in this one. How big is the Oni Fury at this stage of the game? Would you rather have a Primal here, by the way?
Primal could be nice, but Oni Fury is great just for applying the map pressure. But this next fight that's going to break out, what gets scary about teams that just farm for 20 minutes and just give a lot of respect to each other,
right?
It is one fight that could very well determine everything else that goes down, because it's relatively even right now between both these teams, aside from the jungle gaps. A little bit of gap built as well between support and mid, but I just don't know that it's enough to really be all that felt in terms of a heads-up team fight. It really just comes down to who has better execution, but Oni Fury might not even be the prime objective here. It could just be trying to outright wipe, because, if you get a 3 to 4 man wipe or even the whole deicide, that's a fire giant. You don't need the Oni Fury, or you could potentially even have both.
True. With how much time you may actually get in these engagements too. Both the Hunters now level 20, highest in the game, and Johnny just joined them now to hit level 20 as well. So you can see when these solo laners come into the fray, they might be a bit surprised by how much damage they're getting hit for, with how well everybody else has been able to farm across the map. But both teams now starting to group up around the Oni Fury. Johnny a little bit late to the party, but look at Neilmar swooping round the back, blinking from Rafa, engagement from Warriors at the same time to avoid the ultimate. Now Rafa's under pressure at the same time as Ducky's looking to keep Cuvo busy. All the while, Neilmar has got Zeros and Johnny pinned back, and Zeros could die on his own. Cuvo Fred, meanwhile, have the same issue with Emelito and Ducky, but Ducky can't find the kill in time. Neil will get that kill on 1v2 on the backside there, up against Zeros and Johnny. Meanwhile, the zoom in from Vote now swooping back, and Ducky's still too deep and on his own.
A nice Primordial Onslaught, the good Children's of Creation placement's going to catch Ducky out, and the separation more so of the Oni Warriors breakdown throughout that team fight. Raffer blinking into the middle of nowhere. Everyone else from Oni Warriors, one of the downsides of that Whirlwind ultimate for the Xingtian, it takes a while to channel, and Raffer just unable to connect with anyone. Oni Warriors completely ignore him for the most part. The fact that Neilma, though, is able to just one-man chase Zero
we should be
the
able to look at
whole
it.
way through this entire engagement.
Productions are solid here, but we can
And
see
the
exactly
thorns.
what he's doing here.
He gets his relics. He
what does he
gets
do?
to harass him. There's nothing that Zeros can do because his form of peels and escape is only going to kill him through that shell spikes. And this is the nuisance. I actually think Neil's the best Kuzenbo out there. I really do. He has a way of just finding carries and isolating them so well. Just took full advantage of the fact that Valhalla Valkyries got too caught up in the moment of trying to kill Cuvo and Vote on the backside. Nika doing a fantastic job yet again. This is really just coming down to the front line, making the difference here for the Warriors.
How did they handle the Kuzen, though? Because that's the thing. The Valhalla Valkyries composition of Cyrus diving in. Xingtian, I guess it's Xingtian.
They just lost track of Zeros.
I mean, do you have to just have Xingtian sit in the back line, protect against the Kuzenbo now? Because to be fair, Xingtian's matchup into Kuz isn't terrible in terms of limiting his options. The up-down from the root is very effective at slowing him down. He's got the ultimate too that can force the Watery Grave potentially. I think that's the only real option you've got in this matchup.
But if you're saving that Xingtian Whirlwind
for that
solely
situation?
for a Kuzenbo aggressing, Warriors have already won then, because that's one of the best team fighting initiations that the Valkyries have, and if they're applying that much just to try and keep Zeros alive, it just opens up other entryways for further punish against the likes of Imelito, against the likes of Johnny, and
I think one thing we can agree on, that can't happen again.
no,
like Neil's
Zeros cannot be left out like that.
He really, in a way, he wasn't. He had Johnny with him, but what can Johnny do? Cubo Fred now looking at Imelito. Imelito will get his ultimate off quick time and get away. He had no beads or Aegis that time round. Johnny forced to save the fight, but now Ducky and Rafa on the rotation. Now the tether goes off from Ducky there, and Cuvo slips away from that, so won't be stunned. Vote turns up, though, and starts to whittle down Ducky's health bar. Meanwhile, Neil Mar causes a problem for Johnny, bringing him towards the carries. Pulls him into the air onto Neil Mar, but Nika in the backline now gets hold and kills Johnny, and the cavalry charges on for Zeros. Beats down again. Aegis not up for another few seconds, so that's a kill onto Zeros, and now Nika's looking for his triple. Won't find it as Rafa gets away, but you can just see how well this front line from Warriors has become.
It's just so chaotic for the Valhalla Valkyries. Yet again, they are just being forced to look in several different directions at once because of all this dive potential that the Chernobog and the Guan Yu were able to create. And Oni Warriors, they don't even need a Fire Giant with the two-man down advantage. They're just going to look to take this best Phoenix outright.
And take a carry with them, or rather a support. Rafa should end up dying here at the tail end and will do so. Carry charge back up from Nika again. And that secures a kill for Cuvo Fred. Right-hand side, Imelito did split push for a tier 2 tower and get it earlier.
That might be game.
But with Neil Mar falling back here, I think Neil can just keep him in combat the whole time and not have to worry. Meanwhile, the Warriors, as you said, are looking to close out Game 2 in under 25 minutes. You called it. We farmed for a good 20 minutes. One team fight, and that'll just be the end of the game in favor of the Warriors. The desk kind of spoke to it best, in my opinion, Taco, going all the way back there. They mentioned this composition from the Warriors is going to be hard to break down or who to go on. And it looks like the Valkyries couldn't find out who.
They just never had a target because they were the targets all along. Zeros, Emil, they never really got a chance to do much of anything. I think that was just a great execution out of Nika, out of Neil, and really just everybody from the Warriors playing their part here.
Rough day for the Valkyries, but the Warriors do at least get themselves onto the scorecards and a win under their belt. After the break, we'll break down that set and look for set 2.
Welcome back, everybody, to the desk as we are ready to break down the Warriors' 2-0 victory over the Valkyries. But before we do that, got to remind you to head on over to shop.smiteproleague.com. That's the place that you can get all the brand new team merch. Every team got their own unique item of clothing that you got to be checking out. In particular, I'm loving that Jazzberry Jam arm sleeve there for the Jade Dragons. I like the Warriors just clean, plain little t-shirt, long sleeve t-shirt. Those are always comfy. And of course, the Valkyries onesie. How can you turn down a Valkyries onesie, Mifflin?
Well, I can tell you how. It's because we got the Camelot Kings merch up there as
It's
well.
looking good.
That King.
What? The King what? Don't say it.
Oh, you're right.
I didn't trust. I really did not trust you to not say it in that moment, so that's why I had to clarify. Again, shop.smartproleague.com. Thanks to Inside Apparel for their help with that, of course. Miff, this game again, close. The Valkyries battling back and forth, and then it's just one team fight, particularly one where Neil makes a big impact, and it's over.
20 minutes of nothing, and then one team fight changes it, right? Ironically, this is the one time the Valkyries don't want a game that goes at that pace. They want to expedite it a little bit this time around with this draft, and unfortunately for them, we're not quite able to do it. But look, man, we were worried about it on the desk, and I think it shows itself in the match. How were the Valkyries ever supposed to get towards that Tiamat, towards that back line from the Warriors? They just couldn't.
They just couldn't. And look at Neil on this dive. I mean, he takes a 2v1 up against a level 20 Tsukiyomi and a Merlin, and he won it. He kills zeros here, gets
It's
a
illegal.
really, really good zone there from him. And this Kuzenbo, we don't see it that often, but ends up working out for him. Nika on this Guan was also fantastic. Definitely a different look for the Oni Warriors, but that's kind of best case scenario, right? Is that you're able to come in with a slightly different look at a draft and still look this good.
Man, I really liked what the Oni Warriors were able to do in this one. They knew exactly what their strengths were. I think they were saying the exact same things we were. Yo, you're good on this Tiamat, bro. Don't sweat a single thing once we get into the team fight phase, and that's exactly how it pans out. In particular, the Oni Warriors did a really good job switching off who was initiating those fights. Neil Ma takes that 2v1, and then just a couple seconds later, he has to tag out at about a quarter HP, so who's in there for him? Well, it's Nika. Cavalry charged right back in. You thought you were out of the blender? You're not. The Oni Warriors just keep hitting him with the mix-ups.
Look, Neil did 11,000 damage. That's more than anyone on the Valkyries, except for Ducky, who's playing solo lane, so you can count that damage however you want it. Yeah, I'm not counting it is what I'm saying. Impressive showing from Neil on that Kuzenbo, but for the entirety of the Oni Warriors, especially to bounce back after yesterday's set not going their way.
No, yeah, unfortunate in general, but we got to sing the praises, bud. The Oni Warriors popping off. I think in particular Cuvo Fred as well does really well today. He has been struggling a little bit in the regular season. Not anymore. It seems like he's really found his footing. Gets the Surcat respect band in Game 2. I think that the Oni Warriors and all their fans can feel pretty confident for how Phase 2 is going to go for them.
2-0 here today over the Valhalla Valkyries, bouncing back after the 2-0 defeat yesterday in the hands of the Olympus Bolt. So, of course, you can take a quick look ahead. We've got the Solar Scarabs and Tartarus Titans coming up later on today, and Titans, Kings, Dragons, Scarabs coming at you tomorrow, of course, starting at 1 p.m. But before we move on from this set victory here for the Warriors, we've got to sit down and talk to one of the victors. I believe we've got Vote standing by with us. Vote, thanks so much for joining us and taking the time. Congratulations on the 2-0 victory. I have to imagine you had a little bit more fun today in the duo lane than you did yesterday with Jake diving your tower constantly.
Yeah, for sure. Last game, kind of got dove at 3 minutes. Doesn't really make life fun, Don't want to experience that ever again. Today was a bit different. Like, it's kind of hard to say that we played good or whatever because they're all like 5 ping. Like, I know how it is for Dodds and Fred.
Yeah.
So I know how they're feeling,
Definitely a tough situation, but got to play with what you got to play with, and you're certainly doing the best with the hand that you've been dealt. Talk to me about this Chernobog. I mean, we haven't seen a whole lot of him during Season 8. What made him the right pick for you today?
That's Tsukuyomi. I just wanted it. I don't know. I was playing a different pick, but I'm not going to say it, but
yeah,
it just
fair
wasn't
enough.
good. Not really played that much, but I was just feeling it,
Feeling it. Certainly made it look pretty good. I don't think you died in today's set on the Chernobog, so you're feeling pretty good about that. How are you feeling about the maturation of your team? I mean, obviously, you guys played well at the Phase 1 playoffs. Coming back here in Phase 2 now, what do you think are some things that you guys are improving upon as we head deeper into the season?
I think we should get more comfortable, like playing the game, how we want to play it, picking the gods we want to play. Like, for playoffs, we were just playing what everyone else thought was good, And I just kind of personally, I just don't want to do it anymore. That's why I play what I think is good.
Well, hey, if Chernobog is it and Kuzenbo's it for Neil, then I think that you guys are going to find some success. Congratulations on your 2-0 today vote.
Thank you.
And with that, we're going to head to a quick break. We'll be right back with the second set of the day. Stick with us.